What happens when someone quietly, relentlessly convinces you that your mind cannot be trusted? At first you brush it off. You know who you are. You know what you saw. You trust your thoughts, your memory, your instincts. But then they keep going. You hear it again, and again, and again. You're imagining things. You always twist what I say. You're just being emotional. You've always had a problem with overreacting. And slowly, something begins to shift. Not all at once, not with a bang, but with a whisper that turns into an echo, bouncing inside your head until it sounds like your own voice. Maybe you are overreacting. Maybe you do remember things wrong. Maybe you're not as rational as you believed. This is gaslighting, a psychological weapon that doesn't just distort reality. It replaces it, not with the truth, but with the version that serves the manipulator. Gaslighting isn't just lying. It's lying with architecture. It's the deliberate construction of an alternate version of reality, designed brick by brick to imprison your perception and quietly dismantle your sense of self. The term comes from the 1944 film Gaslight, where a husband dims the lights in their home and then tells his wife nothing has changed. When she questions it, he insists she's imagining things. Day by day, she begins to believe him, that she's unstable, that she's broken, that she can't trust her own eyes. This tactic, once seen as the stuff of cinema, is now recognized as one of the most chilling forms of psychological manipulation. It happens in abusive relationships, in authoritarian regimes, in cults, corporations, and even families. And most terrifying of all, it works. It begins subtly. A denial here, a contradiction there. You say, "I remember you saying that." They answer, "No, I didn't." You show them a message. They say, "That's not what I meant." You bring up the past. They claim, "You're twisting my words." At first you push back, but soon you're not so sure. Your memory becomes cloudy. Your confidence softens. You replay the conversation over and over in your head, wondering if you were wrong. Then they escalate. You're always so dramatic. You read into everything. Why can't you just let things go? And before you know it, you're apologizing for feelings you didn't choose, for reactions you didn't invent, for boundaries you no longer know how to defend. You begin to doubt your own emotional compass. You wonder if your sadness is valid, if your frustration is justified, if your instincts are broken. And then they isolate you, not by locking the door, but by whispering into your doubts. Your friends don't get it. Your family is turning you against me. They don't really care about you. Piece by piece, they sever the threads that tether you to outside truth. And once you're alone, emotionally, mentally, they no longer need to do the gaslighting. You do it to yourself. You dismiss your own discomfort. You silence the little voice that says something isn't right. You rewrite your own memories so you don't rock the boat, so you don't start a fight, so you can keep the peace. By then, they are no longer just the manipulator. They are your compass, your interpreter, your narrator. And you are lost inside a reality they built for you. A reality where they're always right, and you're always broken. Gaslighting is not just psychological abuse. It is psychological possession. It hijacks your mind from the inside, replacing your beliefs, your perceptions, your self-worth with their voice, their logic, their version of the world. And the longer it goes on, the more invisible it becomes, until one day you wake up and wonder how you got so far from yourself. Or worse, you don't wake up at all. Let this be your reminder. If someone is constantly making you doubt your feelings, your memories, or your reality, that's not love. That's not That's control. And no matter how kind their words may sound, gaslighting always has one goal: to make you forget how to think for yourself. And that is what makes it one of the darkest psychological tricks of all. You've seen it happen. People so consumed by a belief that they seem disconnected from reality itself. They defend the indefensible, reject obvious facts, and cling to ideas that from the outside seem utterly irrational. You wonder, how did they get here? How can someone go so far down the rabbit hole and not even notice? The answer is chilling. They didn't just change their mind. Their mind was rewritten. This is brainwashing, not just a trope from dystopian fiction, not just a Cold War myth, but a real, deeply studied, and terrifyingly effective psychological process, capable of transforming the very way a person thinks, feels, and sees the world. And here's the most unsettling part. No one is completely immune. Not you, not me, not the smartest, most independent thinker you know. To understand the true danger of brainwashing, we must begin with one of its most horrifying case studies. Jonestown. In 1978, over 900 people, including women and children, died in a mass murder-suicide in the jungles of Guyana. They drank cyanide-laced punch, not by force, not in panic, but under the direction and devotion of cult leader Jim Jones. These weren't naive fools. They weren't weak-minded. They were everyday people, teachers, nurses, parents, who had been slowly, carefully, methodically stripped of their independence until they could no longer tell where their own thoughts ended and Jim Jones began. They believed they were making a free choice, and that's the horror of brainwashing. It doesn't coerce you. It makes you want to change, and then convinces you that you chose it all along. So how does this happen? There is a formula, and it works. It always begins with isolation. Cut someone off from outside information, and you begin to control their reality. Jim Jones did it by moving his followers to a remote jungle. But it doesn't require distance. It can happen in toxic relationships, online echo chambers, media bubbles, even rigid belief systems. The more you limit perspectives, the more you limit freedom of thought. Then comes destabilization. You break down mental defenses with exhaustion, confusion, and fear. In cults, this might look like sleep deprivation, emotional manipulation, and public shaming. In politics, it might look like 24/7 crisis coverage and fear-driven narratives. In relationships, it looks like gaslighting, guilt-tripping, and erratic behavior. The goal is simple. Create a mental storm so intense that the person begins to seek shelter in you. They can't think clearly, so they trust the one voice that seems to offer clarity. Then indoctrination begins. Reward what you want. Punish what you don't. Compliance earns affection, praise, belonging. Resistance earns silence, anger, shame. At first it feels like adaptation. Soon it feels like survival. Eventually it feels like identity. Over time, the person starts to repeat the very ideas they once questioned, not because they were forced, but because those ideas have become who they are. And finally, the last stage, reinforcement. Through repetition, through ritual, through group loyalty and the illusion of enlightenment, you make the new belief system permanent. You silence doubt, not by forbidding it, but by making it feel like betrayal. And that's when the transformation is complete. They don't say, "I've been brainwashed." They say, "I've seen the truth." That's why it's so dangerous. Brainwashing never feels like brainwashing. It feels like clarity, like purpose, like finally being awake. And so people stay. in toxic relationships, in manipulative movements, in dangerous ideologies, not because they're weak, but because their mind has been hijacked from within. So, how do you protect yourself? Step 1. Question everything you're told not to question. The moment someone tells you not to think critically, that's the moment to lean in harder. Whether it's a leader, a movement, a partner, or an idea, truth never fears scrutiny. Step 2. Seek diverse perspectives. If you only hear one side of a story, you're already being shaped by someone else's agenda. Even the most convincing truth must be tested by contrast. And step 3. Watch your emotions: fear, guilt, outrage. These are the tools of manipulation. They bypass logic. They hijack judgment. When something makes you feel intensely, pause and ask, who benefits from me thinking this way? Because once brainwashing takes hold, you won't even know it happened. You'll defend it, live by it, and swear it was always your idea. The mind is fragile, not because it's weak, but because it was built to trust, which is why those who seek power don't need weapons, they just need your thoughts. And now that you know the steps, you'll recognize the signs before it's too late. It starts like a dream, a spark that feels too good to be true, because it is. They look into your eyes like they've been waiting for you forever. They text constantly, flood you with compliments, tell you you're special, tell you no one has ever made them feel this way. It's fast, it's intense, it's overwhelming in the most flattering way. But this isn't love. This is love bombing. One of the most seductive forms of psychological control ever invented. It's not about you. It's not about affection. It's about power. And it's one of the most dangerous emotional traps there is. Love bombing begins by hijacking your brain's reward system. Every sweet word, every surprise message, every romantic gesture. It's not just charming. It's chemical. Your brain releases dopamine, the pleasure chemical, the same one that fuels addiction, the same one that lights up when you win a jackpot or get a like on social media. The more they flood you with attention, the higher you feel. The more they say you're perfect, the more you believe it. You bond. You open up. You let your guard down. And just when your heart says, this must be it, the warmth disappears. Suddenly, the good morning texts stop. The compliments fade. The eye contact feels colder. They're distracted, distant, maybe even irritated. You're confused. What happened? You wonder if you did something wrong. You replay conversations. You overthink every word you said. You apologize for things that don't need apologizing. You try harder, and that's exactly what they want. Because love bombing is never about building you up. It's about tearing you down slowly, once you've given them access to your emotions. What you're experiencing now is intermittent reinforcement, a cruel psychological loop where kindness and cruelty are unpredictably mixed. You never know when the affection will return. So you wait, you hope, you work harder. Just like a gambler pulling the lever for one more win, you chase that emotional high you once had, not realizing it was never real to begin with. This cycle, idealize, devalue, discard, is textbook manipulation. It creates dependency, emotional addiction. And by the time you realize what's happening, you're already hooked. Your boundaries are lower. Your self-esteem is cracked. You trust them more than you trust yourself. You think, if I can just be better, if I can just make them happy again. But you can't, because the affection was never genuine. It was bait. Love bombing isn't just found in romantic relationships. It happens in friendships, in cults, even in workplaces. A manager who constantly bites at you, then suddenly criticizes everything. A group that welcomes you with warmth, then uses guilt to keep you loyal. It's all the same pattern. Charm, then control. And the damage runs deep, because you're not just grieving the person. You're grieving the version of yourself they made you believe you were. The radiant, worthy, seen version. Then they took it away. That's why victims often blame themselves. They become desperate for the affection to return. They think, maybe if I just love them more. But no amount of love will change a manipulator's game. So how do you break you free? Step 1. Recognize the pattern. Real love doesn't rush. It builds slowly. Genuine people don't overwhelm you. They respect your pace. Step 2. Pay attention to consistency. Is their affection steady, or does it vanish the moment you ask for emotional safety? Step 3. Trust discomfort. If your gut says something feels off, listen. Love should never leave you anxious, confused, or doubting your own worth. Love bombing is a trap dressed as devotion. It's a mask, a performance, a weaponized version of intimacy. But once you see the pattern, once you understand how carefully it's designed, you won't fall for it again. And that's the one thing a manipulator can't control: your clarity. There's a way to control someone without shouting, without orders, without a single raised voice. You don't have to threaten them. You don't have to argue. All you have to do is make them feel guilty. This is guilt tripping, a quiet, subtle, emotionally invasive tactic that turns a person's empathy against them. No chains, no cages, just invisible threads made of shame and obligation. And those threads are strong enough to hold anyone down. Think back. Have you ever done something you didn't want to do? Not out of desire, not out of love, but because you'd feel too guilty if you didn't. Maybe you drove across town for a favor, even though you were sick. Maybe you apologized for something that wasn't your fault. Maybe you stayed in a toxic relationship because walking away made you feel like a monster. That's guilt tripping at work. It doesn't command. It doesn't demand. It just waits for your conscience to do the heavy lifting. It starts small. A sing, a quiet pause, a look that says, I guess I don't matter to you anymore. The manipulator never needs to be direct. They'll say, oh, after all I've done for you, I guess I'm always the one who cares more. I would have done it for you in a heartbeat. None of these are orders, but they land like commands. Because now, if you don't comply, you're not just saying no. You're being ungrateful. You're being selfish. You're being cruel. That's the trap. You're not just avoiding conflict. You're avoiding being a bad person. But guilt is only one layer of the poison. The deeper toxin is shame. Guilt tells you you did something wrong. Shame, it tells you you are something wrong. It's not, you forgot my birthday. It's, you're a terrible friend. It's not, you made a mistake at work. It's, you're incompetent and you always let people down. Shame doesn't just make you apologize. It makes you shrink. It makes you doubt your worth. It makes you stay silent when you should speak up. It convinces you that your very existence needs fixing. And that is the ultimate form of control. When someone internalizes shame, they stop resisting. They stop pushing back. They don't just believe they've failed. They believe they are a failure. And once that belief sets in, they'll do anything for approval, even if that approval is never coming. Abusive partners do this. Cult leaders do this. Manipulative bosses do this. They convince you that you owe them, that your very being is a disappointment, that your flaws are permanent. and that the only way to fix it is to earn their forgiveness, over and over, forever. But the most insidious form of guilt tripping isn't external, it's internal. Over time, we absorb these voices. We stop needing someone else to shame us. We do it ourselves. We think, oh, I shouldn't say no. I should be a better daughter. I should sacrifice more. I don't deserve happiness until I fix everything. This inner guilt becomes a habit. We make decisions not from clarity, but from fear of being judged, abandoned, or unloved. And in that moment, we're no longer free. So how do you escape this quiet prison? Start by asking the question, am I doing this because I truly want to, or because I'm afraid of being labeled selfish? Do I really owe them, or have they made me feel like I do? Who benefits from my self-blame? And most importantly, who taught me that saying no makes me a bad person? Once you start seeing the pattern, the spell weakens. Because guilt only works when it stays unexamined. Shame only thrives in silence. But the moment you speak it, the moment you say, "This isn't mine to carry," you take your power back. Your worth is not measured by how much you sacrifice. It's not defined by someone else's disappointment. It's not conditional. And anyone who makes you feel otherwise doesn't deserve the space they're taking in your mind. The most dangerous kind of control is the kind that doesn't look like control at all. There are no chains, no handcuffs, no prison cells, just a whisper that says, "You need me." This is cultivated dependence, a psychological strategy so quiet, so calculated, that by the time you notice it, you've already surrendered your freedom. It's the favorite tool of cult leaders, abusive partners, and authoritarian regimes, not because it's loud, but because it works. Why use force when you can make someone believe they can't survive without you? It begins innocently, with concern, with care, with statements that seem protective, even loving. Your friends don't really get you. Your family just stresses you out. Only we understand the truth. The manipulator doesn't demand isolation, they suggest it. Over and over, until suggestion becomes assumption and assumption becomes belief. One by one, your connections shrink. You stop reaching out, you stop sharing. You start believing the people who love you are the problem, and the one who's isolating you is the solution. Once the outer world is silenced, the inner world gets rewritten. You're not forced to stay, you choose to, but only because the choices you once had have been erased. This is the genius of engineered dependence. The manipulator doesn't need to chase you, they simply cut off every exit until their presence becomes your only road to safety, your only voice of reason, your only sense of self. It's not just emotional, it's logistical. They might control your money, your decisions, even your ability to leave the house. But here's the cruelest part. You won't feel imprisoned. You'll feel protected. You'll feel grateful. You'll say, "They're just helping me. They understand me better than anyone. I'd fall apart without them." And that's the goal, to make you rewrite your own captivity as love. Cults do this by cutting members off from families, replacing every trusted source with the leader's voice. Abusive partners erode your confidence until you no longer believe you could stand on your own. Toxic regimes block outside information, ensuring their citizens can't imagine a reality beyond their borders. And once your belief system has been reprogrammed, you don't need to be restrained. You'll stay voluntarily, not because you can't leave, but because freedom now feels like danger. That's the moment the trap is complete. Because when someone has spent long enough in a cage, they begin to fear the scut. They've been taught, "Without me, you're nothing. Without me, The world will hurt you. Without me, you'll fail. And if you hear it enough, you'll start to believe it. This kind of dependence isn't physical. It's psychological reprogramming. And like all great manipulations, it disguises itself as love, protection, wisdom. So how do you break free? You start by questioning who benefits from your dependence. Who gains when you feel small? Who grows stronger when you grow weaker? And who told you that you couldn't survive on your own? You rebuild your world brick by brick. You reclaim lost voices. You reach out to those who were pushed away. You remember what it felt like to think for yourself. Because freedom is not just the absence of chains. It's the presence of self-trust. And the moment you realize you are always strong enough to walk away, the spell begins to break. She was a wealthy heiress, kidnapped, locked away, tortured, and then she picked up a weapon and robbed a bank for the very people who held her hostage. Her name was Patty Hearst, and her transformation shocked the world. But this wasn't just a strange twist of fate. It was a clear, chilling example of a psychological collapse, a phenomenon called learned helplessness. At first, Patty resisted. She fought back. She cried for help. But the beatings didn't stop. The darkness didn't lift. The isolation didn't end. Eventually, her will to fight began to decay, and then something terrifying happened. She didn't just surrender, she adapted. Not out of weakness, but out of survival. And when the door finally opened, she didn't run. She picked up their gun and became one of them. This is the horror of learned helplessness. It's when a mind, after enough pain, enough defeat, enough futility, decides that escape is no longer possible, even when it is. Psychologists first uncovered this concept in a study involving dogs. Placed in cages with electrified floors, the dogs initially tried to flee. They scratched, jumped, cried out. But there was no escape. No matter what they did, the shocks continued. Eventually they stopped trying. They lay down, silent, still, defeated. Then the experiment changed. The doors were opened. Freedom was offered, but the dogs didn't move. They had learned that trying was pointless. And that lesson stuck. This is what happens in toxic relationships, in cults, in prisons, in systems that thrive on control. Step by step, resistance is replaced by resignation. It starts with unpredictable punishment. One moment you're comforted, the next you're torn down. This erratic cycle traps the brain in confusion and anxiety. You stop preparing for rescue and start preparing for survival. Then comes verbal erosion. You're told you're stupid, that you're incapable, that without them, you're nothing. Over time, these insults are no longer external. They become internal. You don't just hear them, you believe them. After that, they remove your lifelines. Family, friends, outsiders. People who might remind you of who you once were. Now, you're completely isolated, cut off, alone. The manipulator becomes the only voice you hear, and then they become your lifeline. They feed you, clothe you, decide when you sleep, what you think, how you feel. You rely on them for everything. You don't just lose your freedom. You lose your ability to want freedom. Because when you've been broken for long enough, safety starts to look like submission. And submission begins to feel like love. This is why victims stay. Why prisoners bond with captors. Why people in toxic relationships defend the very person hurting them. It's not stupidity. It's not cowardice. It's neurological conditioning. When the brain is repeatedly punished for resisting, it eventually stops resisting. Not because it agrees, but because it believes escape is impossible. And that belief is the final prison. Learned helplessness is the psychological version of clipping someone's wings and then convincing them they were never meant to fly. So, how do you undo it? The first step is this. You must see the cage. You must recognize that the bars are real, but also that they can be broken. The second step is to rebuild agency, one choice at a time, one voice reclaimed, one moment of defiance, even if it feels like a whisper. And the third step, connection. You must hear from others what you've forgotten, that you are capable, that you are not alone, that you can walk away, because the most powerful lie of learned helplessness is that you're stuck forever. But you're not. You never were. There's a moment, a sharp, unmistakable moment, when someone held against their will should fear their captor, hate them, resist, escape. But sometimes something else happens, something strange, something deeply unsettling. Instead of fighting, the victim begins to trust. Instead of running, they begin to stay. And in the most disturbing cases, they even begin to love. This is Stockholm Syndrome, a psychological paradox so twisted it feels like fiction. But it's not. The term was born in 1973 during a bank robbery in Stockholm, Sweden. 4 hostages were trapped in a vault for 6 days. Armed criminals controlled their food, their freedom, and their fate. And when the standoff ended, the world expected tears of joy, relief, outrage. But what they saw was confusion. The hostages didn't condemn their captors. They defended them. One even raised money for their legal defense. People were stunned. Psychologists were baffled. But the truth behind this strange response is darker than most are willing to admit. Stockholm Syndrome isn't weakness. It's survival, a terrifying adaptation born from powerlessness and fear. When someone is trapped, cut off from the world, dominated by a person who decides whether they eat, sleep, live, or die, their brain can't afford to keep resisting, so it rewires itself. And what once felt like fear starts to feel like safety. The mind latches onto the smallest signs of mercy. A captor who offers food, a kind word, a moment of calm in the chaos of captivity. These small gestures in any other context would mean nothing, but in a hostage situation they mean everything. And here's the horrifying part. The mind begins to bond not because it wants to, but because it has no other option. When your enemy is your only source of comfort, your brain clings to them. It reshapes reality to protect you from psychological collapse. This is the root of the syndrome. Next comes isolation. The victim is cut off from friends, family, every outside influence. Their only human contact is the captor. Their only reality to me is the one that captor creates. And slowly, painfully, the victim's identity begins to erode. They stop questioning. They start justifying. This isn't so bad. They're under stress too. I understand why they're doing this. And the worst part, they mean it. Because at that point, denial feels safer than truth. Then comes dependence. The final lock clicks into place. Now every basic need, food, sleep, bathroom breaks, human contact, is filtered through the captor. The victim no longer asks, "What's right?" or "What's true?" They ask, "What will keep them happy?" And slowly, resistance dies. What's left is a twisted bond, one built on fear, survival, and control. But the victim doesn't feel controlled. They feel protected. They feel seen. They feel connected. This is why hostages defend their captors. Why abused victims apologize for bruise. Why prisoners of war sometimes side with their jailers. The world looks on and says, "Why didn't they run? Why didn't they scream? Why did they go back?" And the answer is always the same, because their mind convinced them it was the only way to survive. Stockholm Syndrome isn't just about trauma. It's about how trauma reshapes truth, how fear can wear the mask of love, and how loyalty can be forged in the very fire meant to destroy you. It's not a choice. It's a defense mechanism. And once it takes root, it feels unbreakable. So how do you escape it? You have to see the lie. You have to recognize that comfort doesn't always mean safety. That kindness in captivity is still captivity. And most importantly, you have to remember who you were before the manipulation began. Because Stockholm Syndrome is a theft, not just of freedom, but of perception. And the first step to reclaiming yourself is learning to doubt the very story you've been taught to believe. What if I told you that some of your most vivid memories, the ones you'd bet your life on, might never have happened at all? What if someone could reach into your mind, twist the past, and plant events that never occurred, and you'd believe them as confidently as you believe the sky is blue? It sounds like science fiction, but it isn't. This is memory manipulation, a chilling psychological phenomenon where truth and fiction blend so seamlessly that even you can't tell them apart. Our memories feel sacred, like archives, safe and untouched. But they're not. Memory is one of the most fragile, malleable, and deceiving aspects of the human mind. And that makes it the perfect tool for those who wish to control you without you even noticing. Take the Lost in the Mall experiment by psychologist Elizabeth Loftus. One of the most disturbing demonstrations of how easily memories can be altered. Participants were told several stories from their childhood. Most were true, but one was entirely fabricated. They were told that as a child, they had once been lost in a shopping mall. At first, they were certain it hadn't happened, but after repeated questioning, gentle prompting, and subtle nudges, something changed. They began to remember what the mall looked like, who found them, how scared they were, what they were wearing, how they cried, how relieved they felt when it ended. But here's the terrifying truth. None of it ever happened. Their brains didn't just misremember. They invented the memory and stitched it into their own past as if it had always been there. This isn't an isolated anomaly. This is how memory works. Your brain doesn't store moments like a video camera. It reconstructs them every time you recall them. It fills in gaps, smooths the edges, adds new details, and slowly, what was once a truth becomes a story that can be edited. And here's the most disturbing part. The more you remember something, the less accurate it becomes. This means that anyone, a friend, a partner, a leader, a stranger, can shape your memories if they're skilled enough to make you doubt your handle. It starts with suggestion. Are you sure that's what happened? I remember it differently. That's not how I recall it at all. These phrases seem harmless, but they're poison for the mind. Your brain, desperate for consistency, adjusts its recollection, it bends, it conforms. Before long, you're defending a memory that isn't even yours. Next comes reinforcement. Multiple people agree on a false version of events, whether they're lying or just misremembering. The effect is the same. You're outnumbered, and so your brain surrenders. If everyone else remembers it that way, maybe I'm the one who's wrong. Social agreement is more powerful than truth. But this isn't just a mental curiosity. It's a weapon, a silent coup against your sense of self. Memory manipulation has been used in police interrogations to extract false confessions. A suspect is questioned for hours, fed misinformation, and eventually, they begin to believe they committed a crime they never touched. It's been used in abusive relationships, where a manipulative partner reframes past events, making the victim feel like they were always the problem. You said that. No, I never did that. You're imagining things. You always twist what happened, and slowly, painfully, the victim begins to doubt their own mind. Governments have used it too, through propaganda, by rewriting history, erasing inconvenient facts, glorifying convenient lies, until the entire populations look back on the past with manufactured nostalgia and selective amnesia. Because here's the truth. Memory is identity. It shapes who you are, what you believe, how you love, how you fear, how you act. So, if someone else controls your memories, they don't just rewrite your past. They control your future. And the scariest part? You won't even notice. You'll wake up one day and wonder how you ever thought differently. You'll swear it's always been this way. You'll defend the implanted memory as if your life depends on it. Because in your mind, it's not false. It's you. So how do you protect yourself? You question what feels unquestionable. You stay vigilant when your memories are challenged. You compare recollections with evidence, with records, with trusted perspectives. And most importantly, you remember that memory is a construction, not a photograph, but a painting, vulnerable to every brushstroke of suggestion. Because once your past has been stolen, everything else is up for grabs. Fear crushes critical thinking and rewires the brain into survival mode. When fear takes over, people don't analyze. They don't reflect. They don't ask questions. They obey. This is the dark psychology of fear-mongering, a manipulation tactic so powerful, it has turned entire nations into puppets on a string. It started with a trigger, a looming threat, a whisper of danger. Something's coming, something terrible. And once fear is lit like a match, it spreads like wildfire. One of the most haunting examples, the Salem witch trials of the 1600s. A small New England town descended into chaos. Why? Because people were afraid. They were told that witches walked among them, that evil wore familiar faces, and that anyone, even your neighbor, your friend, your child, could be a hidden enemy. The fear was so consuming that logic died. People confessed to crimes they didn't commit just to avoid being burned, and those who refused to confess, they were executed anyway. This is what fear does. It doesn't just control behavior, it breaks down identity. It divides communities. It turns people against each other and against themselves. But fear-mongering isn't limited to historical witch hunts. It's everywhere. Right now, in toxic workplaces, a manipulative boss keeps their employees terrified. Terrified of losing their jobs, their health care, their livelihood. They accept mistreatment because they fear what might happen if they speak up. In abusive relationships, a controlling partner paints the outside world as cold, cruel, and unsafe. You'll never survive without me. No one else will understand you. Fear isolates. Fear cages. In politics and media, fear becomes a currency. Every headline screams catastrophe. Every speech warns of collapse. And always, there's one savior, one system, one ideology offered as the only solution. If you don't vote for us, the country will fall apart. If you don't believe us, you're the enemy. The more anxious you are, the more easily you're led. That's because fear hijacks the brain. The amygdala, the part responsible for detecting threats, goes into overdrive. It drowns out the prefrontal cortex, the rational part of the brain that weighs consequences and thinks long-term. In other words, fear makes you impulsive. It narrows your vision. It blinds you to alternatives. And in that tunnel of panic, the one who whispers a way out becomes your savior, even if they created the fear to begin with. This is why fear-based marketing works so well. Without this cream, you'll age. Without this insurance, you'll be ruined. Without this supplement, you'll die early. It's not just selling a product. It's selling protection from a threat they invented. And once you believe you're in danger, you'll pay any price to feel safe again. But fear-mongering goes deeper than manipulation. It restructures society. It's used to justify censorship, war, oppression, and silence. It teaches people to trade freedom for security, truth for comfort, and an individuality for obedience. But here's what makes it so dangerous. Fear-driven manipulation doesn't feel like control. It feels like caution. It feels like urgency. It feels like someone looking out for you. You don't even realize you're being puppeteered, because fear wears a mask. One of care, one of protection, one of responsibility. But if someone is constantly feeding your panic, keeping you anxious, and offering themselves as the only answer, step back. Ask yourself, who profits from my fear? Who gains from my panic? Because when fear stops being a warning and starts becoming a leash, someone else is holding the other end. There's a kind of manipulation so subtle, so disguised, that you don't even realize you've been captured. It doesn't come with threats. It doesn't shout or scream. It whispers, softly, lovingly, but always with a hook buried deep. This is emotional blackmail, one of the most dangerous psychological traps, because it doesn't control you with force. It controls you with your own conscience. It sounds like, if you really loved me, you wouldn't question me. After everything I've done for you, how could you? If you leave me, I don't know how I'll survive. These aren't just emotional outbursts. They're strategic, calculated, designed not to inform you, but to control you. Emotional blackmail makes you feel like saying no is cruel, like setting a boundary is betrayal, like walking away is an act of violence. And so you stay. You give in. You betray yourself just to avoid the crushing weight of guilt. This kind of manipulation isn't just found in romantic relationships. It lives in families, friendships, workplaces, and even entire movements. Take organized crime. Mob bosses don't just rule with violence. They rule with obligation. They do you a favor, a gift you never asked for. But now you're indebted. Refusing to return the favor isn't just seen as selfish. It's seen as disloyal. Refusal isn't resistance, it's betrayal. That's how deeply emotional blackmail can program a sense of moral obligation where none should exist. The pattern is always the same. First, a demand, subtle or direct. They want something. Your time, your silence, your loyalty, your compliance. But instead of asking, they set a trap. Next comes the emotional trigger, guilt, fear, shame. They act wounded. They explode in anger. They go cold, withholding affection, making you believe you've hurt them. And finally, they offer you a way out. If you would just do this for me, everything will be fine. It's never about choice. It's about pressure. You're not deciding. You're surrendering to avoid emotional consequences that were never yours to carry. And the scariest part, most people don't realize it's happening. They think they're being kind, compassionate, loyal. But what they're really being is controlled. Because emotional blackmail doesn't demand obedience. It makes you believe that obedience is the only moral option. You stay in the relationship not because you're happy, but because leaving would make you feel like a monster. You agree to things you don't want, not because you care, but because the guilt has rewired your brain into thinking self-preservation is selfish. So how do you break free? Awareness is the first weapon. If someone's love only exists when you comply, if boundaries lead to punishment or to silence, if no feels like violence, you are not in a healthy connection. You are in a trap. And the key to escape? Refuse to play the game. Don't explain. Don't justify. Don't argue. Because once you start defending yourself, you've already stepped onto their stage, reading from their script. Instead, respond with clarity. I hear you, but this is my decision. No apology, no guilt, just truth. Because here's the chilling reality. Emotional blackmailers don't want fairness. They don't want compromise. They want control. And when they realize they can't manipulate your emotions anymore, they'll either escalate their tactics or quietly move on to someone more vulnerable. Everyone has insecurities, whispers in the mind that say, "You're not enough. You'll fail. They don't really like you." Now imagine someone discovering exactly which buttons make you flinch and pressing them again and again until you dance to their tune. This is the dark art of manipulation, weaponizing your insecurities to gain control over your mind, your actions, your self-worth. And it's more common than you think. It doesn't require genius. It just requires observation. A few questions, a few conversations, a few carefully timed compliments or jabs. And suddenly, they know exactly what you fear. And once they know, they twist it. A partner comments on your looks just enough to plant a seed of doubt. So you chase their approval. A boss casually reminds you how replaceable you are. So you work longer hours for less respect. A friend jokes about your past failures, not to help you grow, but to make sure you never grow too much. This is how they gain power. Not through force, through emotional engineering. By becoming the gatekeeper of your self-worth, they push you down, then hold out a hand to lift you. Only now you think you need that hand. You forget you ever stood tall on your own. Even billionaires aren't immune. Take Bernie Madoff, the architect of the biggest Ponzi scheme in history. He didn't just target greed. He targeted insecurity. He made his victims feel chosen, exclusive, special. He weaponized their fear of missing out, of not being elite enough, of not being included. And they gave him everything. That's how this trick works. It doesn't attack you. It seduces you. It tells you you're not quite enough, but they can make you enough. And when someone else holds the key to your confidence, you'll do anything to keep them close, even if it means sacrificing your dignity, your boundaries, your truth. You see it in relationships, where one partner slowly chips away at the other's self-image until they feel lucky to be loved at all. You see it in families, where toxic parents frame themselves as the only reason their child has value, success, or survival. You see it in friendships, where someone always has to be a little more successful than you, so they keep your wins in a smaller frame. But perhaps the most powerful use of this trick today? Social media. Algorithms designed to make you feel less attractive, less successful, less happy. So you buy more, scroll more, consume more. Influencers who stage lives so perfect you question your own. Brands that invent flaws just so they can sell you the fix. You didn't know you needed this until we showed you what was wrong. And suddenly you're insecure about something that never existed until someone sold you the fear. So how do you defend yourself? Step 1. Awareness. Ask, is this feedback helping me grow or making me shrink? If someone's presence makes you question your worth more than it affirms it, they're not supporting you. They're shaping you. Step 2. Rebuild yourself. away from their mirror, from your own truth, not their distortions. When your confidence comes from within, no one can take it. No one can trade it for control. Step 3. Remember, anyone who truly loves you will never use your wounds to win your obedience. They'll help you heal them, not press them until you break, because the real danger of this trick is not just in falling for it, it's in never noticing you did. There's a way to make someone question everything about themselves without ever raising your voice. A way to make someone feel small, replaceable, desperate for approval, without ever saying anything directly cruel. It's quiet, it's clever, and it works like a charm too. This is triangulation, so a psychological trick that introduces a third party, real or imagined, into a relationship to destabilize, divide, and dominate. It starts small. A passing comment, a story about someone else, a casual comparison. You know, my ex used to make the best lasagna. She's just naturally more ambitious than most. I get so many messages, it's crazy. At first, it doesn't feel like manipulation. It feels like conversation, like harmless remarks. But slowly, it begins to erode something essential. The victim, who once felt secure, now starts to second-guess their place. They wonder if they're enough, if they're being measured, if they're being compared and found lacking. Suddenly, they're competing for attention that used to be freely given. They're chasing validation they didn't used to have to earn. And just like that, they're hooked. But this is only the beginning, because the next phase is even more dangerous. Jealousy induction. Now, it's not just implied, it's orchestrated. A partner flirts in plain sight, laughs too loudly with someone new, mentions an admirer again and again. A manipulative friend starts dropping stories about how close they've become with someone else. A boss starts showing off a new favorite employee right after criticizing your work. Every move is calculated. The goal isn't to replace you, it's to make you fear replacement. Because that fear, it's a leash. And when you're insecure, when you're anxious, when you're constantly looking over your shoulder, you stop asking important questions. You stop thinking about whether this relationship is good for you. And instead, you start obsessing over how to be good enough for them. That's the real trick. Triangulation isn't about love or fairness. It's about power, and it shows up everywhere. In romantic relationships, where someone is always being compared to better options. In families, where siblings are pitted against each other for praise. In workplace, where employees are told they're all replaceable, but one is always favored just enough to keep the others on edge. Even in politics, where entire populations are divided, us versus them, left versus right, believers versus doubters. And all of it, a smokescreen, a distraction, a way to maintain control by keeping people too busy fighting each other to ever question the one pulling the strings. But why does it work so well? Because humans are wired for connection. We crave approval. We want to be chosen. When that's threatened, our brain enters a survival state. It says, fix it, win them back, don't be left behind. And in that desperate state, we'll tolerate manipulation just to feel worthy again. But here's what the manipulator doesn't want you to realize. You were always enough. They're not offering you love. They're selling you doubt and charging you your dignity to buy it back. So how do you break free? Step 1. Spot the pattern. Ask yourself, why do I feel like I'm in competition? Who benefits from this tension? Is this connection nourishing me or draining me? Step 2. Refuse the bait. Don't engage. Don't argue. Don't spiral. The moment you stop reacting, they lose their hold. Step 3. Rebuild your center. Because when your self-worth is strong, You don't fear comparison. You don't chase validation. You walk away from games meant to keep you small. And that's the real secret. Triangulation only works when you believe the illusion that someone else's presence makes you less. But when you know your value, they can stack the whole world against you, and you'll still stand tall. Because the moment you stop playing is the moment the game ends, and they lose. Public shaming isn't just cruelty. It's strategy. It's a centuries-old weapon used not only to punish, but to control. Strip away the modern tools. Twitter threads, viral videos, screenshots, and takedowns. And you'll find the same blueprint used in medieval village, religious inquisitions, and authoritarian regimes. Humiliation in public does something no private punishment can. It doesn't just hurt. It isolates. It rewrites identity. It turns a person into a warning. One of the most infamous examples, the Salem witch trials of 1692. Women, mostly innocent, often vulnerable, dragged into the spotlight, accused of dark magic with no evidence, just whispers and paranoia. Confess or suffer. Repent or perish. It wasn't about justice. It was about control through spectacle. And the moment someone became a target, their fate was sealed, not because they were guilty, but because the mob needed blood. But why does public shaming work so terrifyingly well? The answer lies in something ancient: the fear of social rejection. Humans are wired for belonging. For millennia, to be exiled from the tribe meant death. To be mocked, cast out, seen as dangerous or disgusting, that was worse than physical harm. It meant you didn't exist anymore. And that fear still lives inside us. Today, the punishment isn't exile from a village. It's exile from community, from reputation, from safety. And it doesn't have to be thousands. It can be a classroom where a teacher mocks a student, a workplace where a boss ridicules an employee in front of others, a relationship where humiliation is used like a leash, in front of friends and in public on purpose. The result is always the same. The victim shrinks, not just in size, but in spirit. They stop resisting. They start apologizing. Not because they're wrong, but because they want the pain to stop. And that's when the trap closes. Because now the humiliated person often looks to the very person or group who shamed them for comfort, for forgiveness, for approval. And in doing so, they become even easier to control. But something else has made this tactic more dangerous than ever. Social media. A single post, a badly timed video, a misunderstood joke, and within minutes, a tidal wave of strangers becomes judge, jury, and executioner. Outrage is contagious. Accountability mutates into destruction. And the bigger the crowd, the less guilt anyone feels. It's no longer justice. It's performance. And it's permanent. Because on the internet, the punishment often doesn't end. It's bookmarked, reposted, remembered, forever. But here's what many don't realize. Public shaming rarely targets just one person. It's a warning, a signal to everyone else, but step out of line and this could be you. It's social conditioning. Obedience by fear, not because the rules are right, but because the consequences of resistance are unbearable. So how do you survive it? You recognize it. You name it. You call it what it is. A tool of control. The goal is not justice. It's submission. It's to make you kneel, apologize, beg. But the moment you stop believing that you deserve it, the spell begins to break. Shame only works when you carry it. The moment you set it down, refuse to engage, refuse to be defined by the worst interpretation of your words or your past, you become untouchable. Because here's the truth. Everyone makes mistakes, but not everyone survives the spectacle of punishment. And if you do, you become something much more dangerous than someone who made a mistake. You become someone who can't be silenced. Not every form of manipulation screams. Some whisper, some beg, some smile. And just when you're ready to leave, they pull you back in. This is hoovering, named after the vacuum cleaner, because that's exactly what it does. It sucks you back into the toxic cycle just as you begin to escape. It doesn't come with chains. It doesn't shout threats. It arrives with flowers, with apologies, with nostalgia. And that's what makes it dangerous, because this trick isn't about anger. It's about hope. Hope that maybe this time they mean it. Hope that the good version of them, the one who laughs, listens, loves, might finally be real. But make no mistake, hoovering isn't healing. It's bait. And it's used by narcissists, emotional manipulators, abusive partners, even cult leaders, people who care less about love and more about losing control. Just look at Charles Manson. When some of his cult members tried to leave, he didn't always threaten. He comforted. He convinced. He told them they were special, chosen, irreplaceable, not to win them back, but to own them again. This is the essence of hoovering. Reattachment disguised as reconciliation. So how does it work? There are three main hoovers, each more deceptive than the last. The love bomb hoover. They shower you with affection. I miss you. I've changed. They play your song, send your favorite photo, mention the inside joke only you two shared. For a moment they become the person you wish they were, but only for as long as it takes to get you back. The pity hoover. If love doesn't work, they pivot to guilt. Suddenly they're sick, depressed, lost without you. They won't say, come back. Instead they'll say, if you leave me, I don't know if I'll make it. They don't ask. They trap. They make your freedom feel like betrayal. The anger hoover. When kindness and pity fail, they go nuclear. They insult you, blame you, mock you online. They post smiling selfies pretending they've moved on. But it's not joy. It's bait. They want you to react. Any reaction means they still control you, because to the manipulator, love and hate are the same. As long as you stay emotionally hooked. And here's why it works. Your brain wants closure. A kind word erases 10 cruel ones. A cruel word makes you crave the kindness again. You start chasing the highs, ignoring the lows. You forget the cycle, because it's designed that way. But this is not connection, it's conditioning. So how do you break free? Step 1. Call it what it is. Not love, not regret, not change. Control. Step 2. Do not respond. Not to a text, not to a post, not even to explain yourself. Because the moment you reply, the cycle begins again. Block, mute, delete, complete. And step 3. Resist the urge to fix the story. You don't need closure, you need distance. Because the only thing worse than leaving is being pulled back and only to suffer again. Hoovering only works when it's fed. And the most powerful move you can make is silence. Not because you don't care, but because you finally do. About yourself, about your peace, about a future that no longer includes the vacuum of control. Why do people stay in broken systems? Why do they defend lies, cling to harm, protect what's poisoning them? It's not ignorance, not weakness, not stubbornness. It's a psychological war waged deep inside the mind. It's a trap called cognitive dissonance. This is the mental tension that arises when two conflicting truths try to live in the same brain. The belief, I'm a smart, rational person. The evidence, I've been following something destructive. The result? Discomfort, anxiety, a sense of the world shaking beneath your feet. So, what do most people do? They don't leave, they don't run, they dig deeper, they rewrite the narrative, they bend truth until it fits their comfort. Because to admit they were wrong is to admit they were fooled. And that hurts more than the lie. Take the Heaven's Gate cult. They believed a spaceship would arrive, ready to take them to a higher realm. It didn't. Nothing came. But instead of questioning their belief, they doubled down. They called it a test of faith. They made it sacred. And in 1990, that belief ended in mass suicide. Not because they were evil, not because they were weak, but because the truth would have shattered their entire reality. That is the power of cognitive dissonance. And it's not just in cults, it's in corporate boardrooms, relationships, politics, families. A toxic boss asks for one unethical favor. You do it. It's just once, you say, then comes another and another. You justify it. Because if you don't, you'll have to admit you sold out long ago. An abusive partner gaslights you into confusion. One small twist of reality, one contradiction, you think, they didn't mean it. I must have provoked it. And every time you justify the pain, you sink deeper into the trap. You start to believe that enduring it proves loyalty, that staying means strength. But it's not strength. It's survival instinct gone sideways. Cognitive dissonance doesn't just happen in private. It happens collectively. Entire nations defend injustice. Communities justify corruption. Movements cling to falsehoods because the truth would mean admitting they were wrong from the start. People don't protect what's right, they protect what they've already invested in. So how do you escape? First, ask the hardest question. Am I defending this because it's right? Or because I can't stand being wrong? Second, step back. Detach emotionally. Let the facts speak without the weight of your pride. The pain of being wrong is temporary. The pain of living a lie lasts forever. And third, know this. The more energy you spend trying to convince yourself you're right, the more you're confirming that you know deep down you're not. The only way out isn't to win the argument. It's to let go of it. Because the truth doesn't trap you. The lie does. And once you stop fighting to preserve the illusion, you give yourself the freedom to finally wake up. You laugh when others laugh. You flinch when someone gets hurt. You feel a pull, subtle, invisible, when you're around someone crying, smiling, or afraid. That's not just emotion. It's not even choice. It's your brain copying what it sees. And it can be used against you. At the center of this is a powerful neural force, mirror neurons. These brain cells fire not just when you act, but when you watch others act. You smile, I smile. You wince, I feel it in my bones. It's the core of empathy, of learning, of human connection, and of manipulation. One of the darkest examples, Adolf Hitler. He didn't just speak. He mirrored. He fed the crowd's fear back to them. He amplified their rage. He reflected their despair and promised meaning. The crowd saw themselves in him. He didn't change their minds. He hijacked their emotions. That's how mirroring works. It bypasses logic. It slips under the radar. It whispers, "This person is like me," even when they're not. And it's not just on world stages. It's in boardrooms, in dating, in scams. A skilled manipulator will match your tone, mirror your posture, repeat your words back in different form. And without knowing why, you feel safe. You feel seen. You feel understood. But they're not connecting with you. They're studying you, reflecting you back like a polished mask. And behind the mask, control. This is why con artists can make strangers trust them instantly. Why cult leaders make people spill secrets within hours. It's not charm, it's mirroring. And it works. Even romantic predators use it. At first they like everything you like. They believe what you believe. They feel like a soulmate. But it's a performance. Once you're hooked, the mirroring stops. The manipulation begins. Because you're no longer falling for who they are, you're chasing the reflection they built out of you. And this goes even deeper. Today, algorithms do the same. Your feed doesn't show you truth. It shows you you, your fears, your beliefs, your politics, your past searches. Social media platforms become digital mirrors. You think you're exploring the world, but you're stuck in a hall of reflections, each one more flattering or more terrifying than the last. This breeds division, radicalization, narrow thinking. Because when the machine only reflects what you already believe, you stop growing. And worse, you stop questioning. So how do you fight back? First, notice the mirror. If someone agrees too easily, smiles too precisely, echoes too perfectly, pause. Genuine people have friction. They surprise you. They challenge you. Manipulators do not. They blend. Second, disrupt. Shift your posture. Ask a strange question. Break the rhythm. A manipulator relies on predictability. Take that away, and they falter. And finally, own your awareness. Mirroring is human. It builds empathy, connection, healing. But when someone uses your own reflection to guide you toward trust, you didn't give. That's not empathy. That's an invasion. And the moment you see the mirror, you can step away before it traps you in a world that isn't real. Empathy is a gift. It binds us, heals us, allows us to feel what others feel and respond with compassion. But in the wrong hands, that same gift becomes a trap. Because the most dangerous manipulators don't chain their victims. They guilt them into staying. They don't force obedience. They make it feel like a choice. Take one of the most disturbing examples, Munchausen syndrome by proxy. A caregiver, usually a parent, fabricates or induces illness in a child. They poison. They lie. They orchestrate suffering. And all the while they are praised as loving, devoted, selfless. The child suffers, in pain, afraid, and utterly dependent. But they never question the abuser. Because they've been taught, this person is saving me. And the abuser, they feed off the attention, the sympathy, the control. That's how empathy is weaponized, not through violence, but through illusion. The illusion that you're helping, that you're doing the right thing, that your sacrifice is noble. Even when it's killing you, it starts small. I don't know what I'd do without you. You're the only one who understands me. If you leave, I'll fall apart. They don't threaten. They make you feel irreplaceable. So you stay. Not because you're weak, but because you care. That's the genius of it. Manipulators use your kindness as a leash, and the more you care, the tighter it pulls. But what happens when you start to pull away? Compassion fatigue. They escalate. More drama, more crises, more pain. You're not just a partner or friend anymore. You've become a lifeline. And lifelines don't get to rest. They don't get to say no. Not without being called selfish, cold, cruel. At some point, giving in feels easier than fighting back, because saying no starts to feel like letting someone drown. This technique is everywhere. Cults use it to keep members obedient. They call doubt betrayal. They dress manipulation in the robes of a higher calling. Toxic partners use it to trap their victims, always in need, always in crisis, always pulling just enough to keep them from walking away. Scammers prey on it, posing as phasms, begging for help, telling you only you can save them. And here's the terrifying truth. The more empathetic you are, the easier you are to control. Because once compassion becomes obligation, you stop seeing the trap. You start justifying the chains. So, how do you protect yourself? First, ask, is this real care or manufactured need? Second, set boundaries. Empathy without limits becomes enslavement. And third, remember, love, friendship, compassion. These should never feel like a burden you can't escape, because real connection respects your humanity. Manipulation demands your sacrifice, and once you learn to tell the difference, no one can use your kindness to keep you in the dark. Someone buys you lunch. You smile, say thank you, and later, without a word spoken, you feel something tugging at you, an invisible thread pulling you toward returning the favor. A friend helps you move, and when they ask for help, even if it's inconvenient, even if it's unfair, you hesitate to say no, not because you want to help, but because you feel that you should. That's how it begins. Not with pressure, not with force, but with something much harder to resist. Gratitude. Humans are wired for reciprocity, give and take. Acts of kindness exchanged, building the glue that holds society together. It's what keeps relationships balanced, what creates mutual respect. But in the wrong hands, this instinct becomes a silent leash. And the most dangerous part, you won't even see it as manipulation. Take the Hare Krishna movement in the 1970s. They approached strangers in airports with flowers. No catch. Just a smile. Just a gift. But moments later, they would ask for a donation. And what happened? People gave. Even those who didn't want the flower. Even those who were annoyed. Because a small, unwanted gift had triggered a powerful social reflex. I owe them something. That's the reciprocity trap. It doesn't demand. It whispers. It makes saying no feel like a betrayal. It works like this. You're given something, a favor, a compliment, a thoughtful gesture, and suddenly the power dynamic changes. You are no longer equal. You're in debt, even if they never say it. And eventually, they cash it in. A partner who showers you with love, then says, after everything I've done for you. A friend who's always generous, but turns cold the moment you say no. A boss who once gave you an opportunity and now expects endless loyalty in return. At some point, what once looked like generosity starts to feel like a trap, and it gets worse. Businesses do it all the time. Free samples, trial subscriptions, gifts in the mail from charities you've never heard of. They know once you've received something, you'll feel uncomfortable ignoring them. That guilt, that tension, that's by design. Scammers use this too. They help you fix a fake virus on your computer. They send you a gift card. They say, I didn't have to do this for you. And suddenly, you feel indebted. Not because you should, but because it's hard not to. Obligation becomes the cage. You stay in toxic friendships. You tolerate unfair relationships. You give and give, not out of love, but out of guilt. So how do you break the spell? Ask yourself this. Was this a real gift or a disguised transaction? Would this person still be kind if I said no? Because real generosity expects nothing. Real kindness comes without a contract. And anyone who uses their kindness as currency to control you was never being kind at all. Once you see it clearly, you're free. Not just from guilt, but from every manipulator who's ever dressed their leash as a favor. Two people, once inseparable, They laughed together, struggled together, trusted each other with their secrets. And then, slowly, they start to pull apart. Something feels off. A strange silence. A misunderstood word. A flicker of suspicion that wasn't there before. But it didn't begin with betrayal. It began with something smaller. A whisper, a twisted version of the truth. A question planted at just the right moment. This is divide and conquer. One of the oldest psychological tricks in human history. Not by brute force, not by violence, but by fragmentation. You don't need to defeat an enemy if you can turn them against each other, break the bond, and the rest crumbles on its own. It's a tactic that has shaped empires. The British used it to dominate colony, not just through guns and laws, but by stirring ancient rivalries and inflaming local conflicts. Turned group against group, tribe against tribe, keep them fighting amongst themselves, and they'll never unite to challenge your rule. It's been used by monarchs, dictators, CEOs, and yes, by toxic people in your daily life. A manipulative boss subtly praises one employee and then criticizes another behind closed doors. Seeds of doubt planted, insecurity watered, and soon the team fractures. A jealous partner isolates you from friends, not with open hostility, but with carefully placed concerns. Are they really happy for you? Did you hear what they said about you? Suddenly, you second-guess the people you've known for years. And the only voice you trust? The manipulators. Narcissists had to thrive on this tactic. They don't want you to connect. They don't want loyalty shared. They want it centralized, all flowing back to them. And they don't need to lie to do it. A small omission, a reworded sentence, a raised eyebrow at just the right time. That's all it takes to poison a bond and plant division. Because when people feel isolated, when trust collapses, they seek clarity. And the manipulator is already there, calm, convincing, ready to help you interpret the chaos they secretly created. That's the genius of this trap. The person breaking the group becomes the person everyone leans on. They're not exposed. They're admired. They're needed. They play both victim and hero while the real damage spreads beneath the surface. So how do you resist? Start with awareness. If someone always seems to be in the center of conflict, tension, or misunderstanding, but never takes any blame, they might be the one orchestrating it. Ask yourself, is this person encouraging unity or subtly dividing people? Then rebuild trust deliberately. Don't assume, clarify, speak directly, and protect your relationships from the parasites of manipulation. Because once you see the pattern, once you realize who benefits from the broken connections, you can stop being a pawn and reclaim your power before it's divided beyond repair. A man in a white lab coat, calm voice, clipboard in hand. He doesn't shout. He doesn't threaten. He simply says, "Please continue." And so they do. One by one, the participants press the button. Each time, a scream echoes from the next room. Pain, panic, begging, then silence. But they keep going, not because they're evil, not because they want to cause harm, but because someone told them to. Someone who looked like they were in charge. This was the Milgram experiment, a now infamous psychological study from the 1960s. Its purpose, to reveal how far ordinary people would go when instructed by an authority figure. The results? Terrifying. 2/3 of participants delivered what they believed to be potentially lethal electric shocks to a stranger, simply because the man in the lab coat said so. No threats, no guns, no force, just authority. This is authority bias, our natural, often unconscious tendency to obey those who appear to be in power. even when their commands contradict our ethics, our logic, our gut. It's why we trust doctors blindly, why we follow workplace rules we don't agree with, why we nod along when a news anchor says, "This is the truth," because something in us wants to believe that someone else knows better. But what happens when that trust is misplaced? What happens when authority isn't a guide, but a weapon? History tells us exactly what. Governments have ordered mass arrests, executions, and genocide, and millions complied. Why? Because uniform gave the orders. Because ranks and medals replaced conscience. Because questioning authority felt more dangerous than going all out. Cults operate the same way. A charismatic leader demands loyalty, obedience, sacrifice, not with force, but with certainty. They speak with conviction. They present themselves as enlightened, chosen, and slowly the followers surrender. Their doubts, their money, their freedom, sometimes even their lips. And this trick works even without real power. Just the illusion of it is enough. Scammers impersonate police. Con artists pose as government officials. They flash fake badges, use confident voice, speak in commands, and most people obey without question. Why? Because we're conditioned to respond to symbols of power. A lab coat, a clipboard, a uniform, a title. They bypass critical thinking and trigger submission. But when obedience meets fear, this effect multiplies. If the authority figure also threatens, "Do this or you'll be fired," obey or face some punishment, resistance becomes nearly impossible. People comply even when it feels wrong, even when it hurts, even when it goes against everything they believe in, because challenging power feels dangerous, and the fear of consequence outweighs the voice of reason. This is what makes authority bias so dangerous. It doesn't feel like manipulation. It feels like respect, like discipline, like doing the right thing. But ask yourself, who benefits when obedience becomes automatic? Because real authority welcomes questions. It invites accountability. It encourages independent thought. But false authority, it demands silence. It thrives on fear. It wants you to surrender not just your actions, but your will. The first step to breaking free is to pause. Don't let symbols of power override your sense of right and wrong. Just because someone speaks with confidence doesn't mean they're right. And just because they're in charge doesn't mean they should be. Sometimes history doesn't repeat itself because people don't learn. It repeats because manipulation still works. And one of the oldest, most effective psychological weapons is scapegoating. The subtle, insidious art of blaming someone for something they didn't do. It's not about truth. It's not about justice. It's about control. Scapegoating is the trick of simplifying chaos, turning complex problems into a single face, a single name, a single target. And once that target is chosen, the consequences are devastating. Take Salem, Massachusetts Bay Colony. 16-2. Tensions are high. Strange illnesses, failed crops, fear in the air like smoke. No one can explain it. So someone must be to blame. The answer? Witchcraft. Dozens of people, mostly women, accused, imprisoned, executed, all without real evidence, just suspicion, whispers, and fear. Neighbors turned on neighbors, families ripped apart. And yet the deeper problems, the instability, the fear, the stress, never went away. Because the witch trials weren't about solving problems. They were about containing fear by giving it a face to hate. That's the power of scapegoating. It gives people an emotional release. It turns confusion into clarity. even if that clarity is built on a lie, and that it hasn't gone away. In fact, it's everywhere. In families, a parent singles out one child as the problem. That child becomes the source of tension, even when they're just reacting to dysfunction. In relationships, a cheating partner flips the script, accusing the other of paranoia or control. In workplaces, a struggling company blames one department or one employee instead of facing systemic failure. In politics, scapegoating becomes policy. Blame the immigrants, blame the media, blame the poor, blame the opposition. As long as the crowd has a villain to focus on, they stop asking harder questions, like, who really benefits from this distraction? That's the real trick. Blame is a smokescreen. It redirects anger away from those in power and towards someone powerless. And once that anger takes root, truth no longer matters. People start to see the scapegoat not as a person but as a symbol of everything they fear, everything they hate, everything that feels out of their control. Even evidence won't help. Even facts won't break the spell. Because once someone invests in a villain, they need that villain to exist. Without it, they'd have to face uncertainty, or worse, their own role in the chaos. This is how whole societies fall into darkness, not because evil wins, but because fear finds someone to wear its mask. And this trick doesn't require an entire society. It works one-on-one too. A narcissist in a relationship slowly isolates their partner, accusing them of being the problem every time they react. A manipulative boss creates conflict between coworkers, then blames the fallout on one person. The scapegoat becomes the lightning rod, the sacrifice, the one everyone points to, while the real manipulator slips away unnoticed. So, how do you fight back? You start by asking questions. Who benefits from this version of the story? What truth is being ignored? What fear is being redirected? And perhaps most importantly, am I clinging to an easy lie because the truth is too complicated? Because the most dangerous tricks are the ones that feel right, the ones that offer comfort, certainty, a villain to hate. But real growth, real clarity, comes not from pointing fingers, but from looking deeper. Scapegoating offers a simple answer, but the truth is rarely simple. In 1964, a woman named Kitty Genovese was attacked outside her New York apartment. She screamed, she fought, she begged for help for nearly 30 minutes, and people heard her. Lights turned on, windows opened. Dozens of neighbors saw or heard the assault, but no one helped. No one called the police. Not one person intervened. Why? Because everyone assumed someone else would. This chilling effect, a silence born from the presence of others, is called social proof, and it's far more dangerous than most people realize. Social proof is a psychological shortcut. It tells the brain, if many people believe it, it must be true. If everyone else is doing it, it must be safe. If no one's reacting, I shouldn't either. It's what makes crowds ignore red flags, what makes consumers trust strangers on the internet, and what makes moral judgment vanish in group settings. Advertisers use it constantly. #1 bestseller, millions sold. Everyone's switching. They don't need to prove anything. They just need to create the illusion that everyone already agrees. And your brain, trying to conserve energy, falls right in line. Scammers exploit it too. They buy fake reviews, create bot armies, flood comment sections with glowing praise, until the fraud looks like a trend. A scam with 10 fake testimonials feels more trustworthy than a truth that stands alone. And the consequences go beyond marketing. Social proof can override empathy, suspend logic, and even justify violence. Psychologists call it the bystander effect. The more people witness an emergency, the less likely any single person is to act. In one experiment, a person pretends to have a seizure in a crowded area. When alone, most people help. But when others are present, even just a few, help becomes rare. Why? Because everyone waits, watches, assumes someone else will do the right thing. In the meantime, no one does anything at all. That's social proof in action. It doesn't ask, what's right? It asks, what's everyone else doing? And once that question replaces your internal compass, you're no longer making choice. You're copying them. This is how groupthink starts. This is how cults form. How propaganda spreads. How ordinary people in large crowds do things they would never do on their own. Because when you're surrounded by silence, silence feels normal. When you're surrounded by outrage, outrage feels righteous. And when you're surrounded by lies, truth feels like a threat. The most unsettling part? It doesn't take much. A few fake followers, a couple of planted reviews, one manipulated trend, and the rest? People will do on their own. They'll follow, echo, defend, convinced they came to the conclusion themselves. That's the trick. Social proof doesn't feel like manipulation. It feels like consensus. It feels like confidence. It feels like safety in numbers. But in reality, it's often just noise, engineered, orchestrated, and exploited by those who want control. So how do you break free? Pause. Ask, do I believe this because I've thought about it, or because everyone else does? Remember, a million voices saying the same thing can still be wrong. And sometimes doing what no one else is doing is the only way to stay truly free. A room full of people. Everyone nods, everyone agrees, everyone smiles. But something feels wrong. You have a question, a hesitation, a doubt. But no one else speaks, so you keep it to yourself. This is groupthink. And it doesn't silence people with fear. It does it with harmony, with belonging, with the quiet pressure of consensus. Groupthink is a psychological trap, a false sense of unity, where people suppress their own thoughts to avoid disrupting the group or worse, being seen as the problem. In 1996, the Challenger space shuttle exploded, killing all 7 crew members. After the launch, investigations revealed engineers had warned of serious risks, but no one pushed hard enough to stop it. Why? Groupthink. NASA officials, managers, engineers. Everyone wanted the launch to move forward. There was too much pressure, too much momentum, too much silence in the room. So doubts were buried, and tragedy followed. Groupthink works because it feeds on human needs. The need to belong, to be accepted, to avoid conflict, to maintain the illusion of agreement. And manipulators know how to use this. They frame dissent as disloyalty. They create environments where disagreement feels like betrayal. They reward conformity and isolate independent thought. In cults, groupthink is essential. Members mirror the leader's words and repeat them to each other until questioning feels dangerous and silence feels safe. In corporations, employees nod during meetings, even when plans are flawed, because raising objections might get you labeled difficult, or worse, excluded. In families, a dominant parent or partner can set the tone, and everyone else learns to agree, even when something feels off, even when harm is happening in plain sight. The illusion of agreement becomes a prison. No bars, no locks, just invisible pressure to keep the peace. And here's the terrifying part. Groupthink doesn't just suppress truth. It destroys the creativity, innovation, sensation, and moral judgment. Because when everyone thinks the same, no one really thinks at all. So how do you break free from it? First, pause before agreeing. Ask yourself, do I believe this? Or am I just afraid to be the only one who doesn't? Second, speak, even if it shakes the room, especially if it shakes the room, because truth rarely enters quietly. And third, look for allies, people who are quietly uneasy, people who, like you, feel the pressure to conform. Often, they're waiting for someone to go first. Groupthink feels like harmony, but it's silence masquerading as safety. And the only cure is the courage to say, I don't agree. There's a form of manipulation that doesn't aim to control what you do. It aims to control who you believe you are. This is the cultivation of a false identity, a long, subtle psychological process in which your core self is slowly overwritten by someone else's design. It doesn't begin with force. It begins with flattery. The manipulator observes you closely. They find what you long to be, stronger, smarter, more enlightened, and then reflect it back at you. They tell you you're special, chosen, different from the rest. They give you a role to play, and it feels good. They feed you just enough praise to make you dependent. Then they offer a belief system, a cause, or a group that needs you. They wrap your identity in it, not because it's true, but because it's useful to them. And once that new identity sets in, you begin filtering the world through it. You stop asking if something is right or wrong. You ask, would someone like me do this? The original you fades. This technique is used in cults, extremist movements, and even self-help scams. It works in toxic relationships too. When a partner convinces you you're only lovable if you behave a certain way, over time you reshape yourself to keep their approval. And once you've done that long enough, you forget who you were before they arrived. It's not just identity theft, it's identity replacement. You become the character they want you to be. And the scariest part, you think you chose it. So how do you resist it? You remember this: any belief that makes your worth conditional on obedience, on conformity, on approval is not a belief. It's a leash. True identity isn't assigned, it's discovered. And anyone who tries to hand you one isn't offering you truth. They're offering you a cage. The most dangerous manipulations don't come from shouting or control. They come from whispers, from carefully planted seeds that grow in silence. This is how manipulators use self-doubt, not all at once, but drop by drop, until your confidence erodes, your voice shrinks, and your decisions start sounding like questions. It begins subtly. A correction here, a raised eyebrow there, a comment like, "Are you sure?" when you know you were. Soon, you start checking yourself, asking others for permission to believe in your own thoughts. Over time, the manipulator doesn't need to argue anymore. You do it for them. You second-guess your choices. You apologize for things that weren't your fault. You seek validation for feelings you used to trust instinctively. This trick works because it doesn't confront you. It creeps in sideways. It makes you question not just what you think, but whether you're even allowed to think it. Parents use this tactic to raise obedient children. Partners use it to silence independence. Leaders use it to keep followers compliant. Because when someone no longer believes in themselves, they become easy to shape. And the hardest part? It's invisible. To others, you might seem quiet, agreeable, polite. Inside, you're drowning in hesitation. So how do you stop the spiral? First, notice the pattern. If someone consistently makes you feel like your instincts are flawed, like your memories are unreliable, ask why they need you to feel that way. Second, reclaim your voice. Start small. Make one decision without approval. Affirm one thought without apology. Speak one truth, even if it shakes. because the antidote to self-doubt is self-trust. And once you plant that seed, no manipulator can ever uproot you again. Emotions are contagious. Walk into a tense room and you feel it. Watch someone cry and your throat tightens. See a crowd panic and suddenly your heart races too. This isn't imagination, it's biology. And when a manipulator learns to weaponize it, they can control not just what you think, but what you feel. This is emotional contagious exploitation, a psychological trick that turns your empathy into an open door for influence. It begins with emotional projection. The manipulator broadcasts a feeling of fear, rage, sorrow, loud enough to override your own. They cry, shout, withdraw, or dramatize until your nervous system starts mirroring theirs. And then once you're emotionally aligned, you become vulnerable. Your logic dulls. Your defenses drop. Your decisions become reactive, not reflective. Cult leaders master this. They whip followers into euphoric states, then feed them commands. Toxic bosses or influencers broadcast urgency or guilt until their team stops thinking and starts obeying. It works in abusive relationships too. One partner constantly distressed, always in crisis, until the other feels responsible for their emotions. They walk on eggshells, not to avoid conflict, but to keep the emotional storm from erupting. Social media amplifies this tactic. One viral video drenched in outragement or grief can ignite a firestorm of emotion. Suddenly, people are sharing, defending, attacking. Not because they thought it through, but because they felt it through. And that's the trick. The manipulator doesn't argue with facts, they bypass them. They flood your emotional circuits until reason drowns. So how do you resist? First, recognize the wave. When emotions rise fast and sharp, pause. Is it yours? Or did someone hand it to you? Second, restore your baseline. Breathe, step away, recenter. Your emotions are signals, but they shouldn't be steering the wheel if someone else lit the fuse. Because in a world where feelings spread like wildfire, emotional clarity is not just a strength, it's armor. You walk into a store. There are 10 brands of cereal, 20 types of toothpaste, 100 styles of jeans. It feels like freedom. You're in control. You get to choose. But what if that freedom is an illusion? The illusion of choice is one of the most deceptive psychological tricks. It makes you believe you're making independent decisions, when in reality, the options have been carefully curated, framed, and presented to steer you toward a specific outcome. Politicians use it. They give you two sides of the same coin. No matter who you vote for, the core systems stay the same. Retailers use it. You think you're choosing between 10 products, but all of them are owned by the same parent company. The illusion makes you feel powerful while quietly funneling you exactly where they want you to go. But it gets more subtle. Sometimes you're offered a bad option just to make another seem good. Want someone to pick package B? Present A as an overpriced and C as overwhelming. Suddenly, B looks just right, and you feel smart for choosing it. This trick shows up in relationships too. A manipulative partner gives you choice: stay and obey, or leave and be alone. But both choices are framed to serve their control. It's not a decision. It's a trap dressed up as freedom. Even in everyday life, you're nudged, influenced, primed. The layout of a menu, the way a question is phrased, the tone of a voice. They all shape your choices before you even know it. So how do you escape the illusion? First, zoom out. Ask yourself, who created these options? Who benefits from each one? If all paths serve the same master, is it really a choice? Second, Reclaim your agency. True freedom isn't about how many buttons you can push. It's about knowing why you're pushing them in the first place. Because the most powerful form of control isn't taking your freedom. It's convincing you never lost it. You're at a market. The first jacket you see is $800. The second is $250. You buy it because it feels like a deal. But is it? Or did your brain just get anchored? The anchoring effect is a cognitive bias that traps your mind on the first piece of information it sees, a number, a statement, an emotion. Once it's in your head, everything that follows is judged against it. That first anchor, even if it's random, changes how you see reality. Marketers know this. They show you the expensive product first, not because they expect you to buy it, but because it makes everything after look like a bargain. Manipulators use it too. They start with a lie, a planted idea, a shocking claim. And even if you question it later, your mind still drifts back to that first point. It's already set the scale. The same happens in negotiations. The first offer sets the tone. Even if it's absurd, the final outcome rarely strays far from it. Why? Because our minds cling to that anchor like it's truth. Even when it's fiction, it's not just numbers, it's people. You meet someone, and the first impression is charm. Later, you see red flags, but you can't quite shake how warm they seemed at first. The anchor was set, and now you're stuck. So, how do you break free? First, recognize the anchor. Ask, why do I think this is normal? What am I comparing this to? And who gave me that comparison? Second, delay decisions. Give yourself time to gather more data. Let your brain reset before locking onto the first thing it saw. And finally, set your own anchors. Don't let others frame your reality for you. Know what you value. Know what you're worth. Know what you truly want. Because once an anchor is in place, it doesn't just change your choice, it changes your world. Walk into a room where everyone is laughing. You'll probably smile before you even know why. Walk into one filled with tension and your chest tightens. This is emotional contagion, a silent virus of the mind where feelings transfer from person to person without a word being spoken. It's not a metaphor, it's neurology. Your mirror neurons don't just reflect movement, they reflect emotion. When someone near you is anxious, your brain starts to mimic that state. When they're joyful, you get a hit of the same chemical high. It's how mobs form, how panic spreads, how one person's despair can drag down an entire room. But this isn't just about shared experience, it's about control. A manipulator doesn't need to convince you. They just need to feel something strongly enough that you catch it. They act outraged. You start to question yourself. They feign sadness. You soften your resistance. They exude confidence. And suddenly, their lies start to sound like truth. It happens in relationships, at work, in politics, in cults, in crowds. Emotional states become weapons. And the more empathic you are, the more susceptible you become. Because the better you are at feeling what others feel, the easier it is for someone to make you feel what they want. So, how do you protect yourself? First, pause. Ask, is this mine? Or did I absorb it? Second, create space. Breathe. Step outside. Interrupt the cycle before it takes root. And third, be the signal, not the receiver. When you control your state, you influence the room, instead of letting it influence you. Because emotions are contagious, but so is clarity. So is calm. So is strength. And the strongest person in the room isn't the loudest. It's the one who chooses what to feel instead of catching what's offered. A dog is placed in a cage. A shock is delivered through the floor. It yelps, runs, searches for a way out. but every path is blocked. No matter what it tries, it can't escape. Eventually, it stops trying. It lies down and takes the pain, not because it wants to, but because it has learned that nothing it does will make a difference. Now move the same dog to a cage where escape is possible. Open doors, no locks, no shocks. But it still doesn't move. It stays. It suffers. Because in its mind, freedom is no longer real. This is learned helplessness, a psychological condition where repeated failure conditions the mind to accept suffering as unchangeable. And the terrifying part? Humans are just as vulnerable. It happens to people in toxic relationships who try to fix things again and again, only to be met with betrayal or neglect. It happens to workers stuck in oppressive jobs where no amount of effort changes how they're treated. It happens to children raised in abusive homes, taught early that their needs don't matter. Eventually, they stop fighting. Not because they don't care, but because somewhere along the way, they were convinced their voice has no power. The most dangerous manipulations aren't violent. They're repetitive, subtle, silent. They teach you that no is meaningless, that hope is pointless, and that resistance is futile. This trick isn't about overpowering you. It's about exhausting you, wearing you down until you believe the lie that you are weak, that your suffering is just the way things are. And once you internalize that belief, the prison doesn't need bars, because it lives inside your mind. But there's a way out. The first step is to recognize the pattern. Ask, have I stopped trying because I truly believe it's impossible, or because I've been taught to think it is? Learn that helplessness is irreversible. It takes one act of defiance, one change, one voice saying not anymore. Because the truth is, what broke you was not your weakness. It was your persistence, exploited by someone who feared your strength. And the moment you believe again that your actions do matter, the lie collapses. And so does their control. People don't just search for truth. They search for validation. And once they find it, even if it's false, they cling to it. This is the trap of confirmation bias, one of the most widespread psychological blind spots in the human mind. It's the tendency to seek out, favor, and interpret information in a way that confirms what we already believe, not what's true, what feels true. And when this instinct is deliberately reinforced, it becomes a powerful manipulation tactic. A well-known example, cult indoctrination. New members are isolated from outside influence and flooded with stories, symbols, and teachings that all point in the same direction. Every sign, every coincidence, every feeling becomes proof that the belief is right. Doubts are reframed as tests. Contradictions are ignored or punished. And slowly, the mind filters out anything that doesn't fit the narrative. But this doesn't just happen in cults. It happens every day. On your screen, social media algorithms are engineered to feed you more of what you already agree with. You believe one side of a political issue? Soon, your feed is full of posts that reinforce it. Your worldview gets sharper, but also narrower, and you stop seeing other perspectives as valid, or even human. This is how polarization grows, and how echo chambers are formed. Manipulators, whether political leaders, corporations, or con artists, use this bias to shape behavior. They create content, messages, or products that echo back your assumptions. And every time you see something that proves you're right, your belief hardens. Even if it's wrong, even if it's dangerous, the deeper the belief, the harder it becomes to question. And soon, any information that challenges it is seen not as enlightening, but as threatening. So, how do you escape this trap? First, catch yourself in the act. When you agree with something, ask, Am I accepting this because it's true or because it feels comfortable? Second, seek out disconfirming evidence, not to attack it, but to test your own ideas. The strongest minds aren't the ones who are always right. They're the ones willing to be wrong, to change, to evolve, to grow. Because the real danger of confirmation bias isn't just that it distorts reality. It's that it feels so good. You won't even notice it's happening. You hear about something once, a word, an idea, a person's name, and suddenly it seems to appear everywhere. It's not magic. It's not a glitch in reality. It's a psychological trap hiding in plain sight. This is the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon, also known as frequency illusion, a cognitive bias where your brain, once alerted to something new, starts noticing it more often, but falsely believes its actual frequency has increased. It starts subtly. You learn a new term. A friend mentions it casually. Then you see it in a news article, hear it in a podcast, catch it on a billboard. Your mind whispers, "This can't be a coincidence," but it is. The object of your attention was always there. You just weren't primed to notice it. Now, because your awareness has changed, your perception does too. And this shift creates a false pattern, an illusion of significance. Marketers exploit it constantly. They introduce a brand or product subtly, then let your brain do the rest. Once you notice it once, you'll start seeing it everywhere, and then you'll believe it must be popular, essential, or urgently needed. Cult leaders and conspiracy theorists use the same psychological tool. They plant an idea, and once it's in your head, you begin seeing evidence of it all around. In news stories, symbols, coded language. The pattern seems obvious, even prophetic. But here's the trick. The brain doesn't like randomness. It wants order. It wants stories. So, when presented with scattered, unrelated data, it connects the dots, even if those dots were never meant to form a picture. That's why this illusion is so dangerous, because once you believe the pattern is real, you stop questioning its logic. You start validating it. And every repetition, every confirmation feels like proof, but it's not. It's a mirror, reflecting what your mind wants to see. When defend yourself, pause when something suddenly appears everywhere. Ask, did this truly increase? Or am I just more aware? Because the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon doesn't predict the future. It hijacks your attention and turns coincidence into conviction. It starts with a smile, a tilt of the head, a gesture that mirrors your own. Before you know it, you're drawn in, feeling connected, comfortable, understood. But what if I told you that this feeling wasn't an accident? This is the psychological trick known as mirror and matching, a subtle form of mimicry that builds trust, rapport, and emotional openness without a word of force. And in the hands of manipulators, it's a silent weapon. At its source, mirror and a matching taps into our brain's desire to connect. When someone imitates your posture, speech rhythm, or energy level, your subconscious lights up. You think, they're like me. You let your guard down. This is how cold recruiters make strangers feel instantly bonded. It's how salespeople build trust before they sell. It's how toxic partners disarm suspicion in the early days of control. The magic of this tactic lies in its subtlety. It doesn't shout. It whispers. It doesn't push. It aligns. When done skillfully, you won't notice it's happening. All you'll feel is closeness, familiarity, trust. And that's when the real manipulation begins. Once connection is formed, the mirror fades. Suddenly, you're the one doing the adapting, matching their mood, adjusting your words, softening your opinions, because the bond has been sealed, and breaking it feels wrong. But mirror and matching isn't always malicious. In healthy communication, it builds empathy. In therapy, it fosters healing. The danger lies in intent, when it's used not to connect, but to control. So, how do you protect yourself? Watch how someone changes around you. Are they mirroring everyone? Do they shift too quickly into your rhythm? Next, disrupt the flow. Change your posture, cross your arms, switch tone. If they follow, it's a signal. And most importantly, stay grounded in your own identity, because someone who truly respects you doesn't need to become you to earn your trust. Mirror and matching reveals a simple truth about human nature. We trust what reflects us, and that's why reflection in the wrong hands becomes a cage. It begins with agreement, a few shared opinions, a familiar rhythm in speech, a mirrored emotion perfectly timed. You feel understood, aligned, safe. This is pacing, the first half of a powerful psychological technique used by therapists, salespeople, cult leaders, and manipulators alike. And once you're in sync, the next step unfolds quietly. Leading, pacing, and in leading is the art of creating rapport so deep, so seamless, that the other person naturally begins to follow. Their guard drops, their resistance weakens, and they start saying yes without realizing how they got there. Imagine a speaker who matches your frustration with the system, who echoes your doubts, your fears. At first you're just nodding, then they introduce a new idea, something extreme, and you find yourself still nodding. Why? Because you've been paced so well that by the time you're being led, it feels like your own thought. This trick works because the brain craves consistency. Once we align with someone emotionally or rhythmically, breaking that flow feels jarring, so we keep flowing. With them, it's used in negotiations. Start with shared values, then slide in your demands. It's used in persuasion. Start with empathy, end with conversion. But the darkest use? When manipulators pace your pain and lead you into dependency. They'll match your trauma, your worldview, your past, then lead you to believe they're the only one who understands. That only they can fix you, and you follow. Because the pacing felt so real, so deep. So how do you break this pattern? Interrupt it. When you feel swept up in emotional alignment, pause, ask, where is this going? Whose direction am I following? Then step back and lead yourself. Because the most dangerous path isn't one you're forced down. It's the one you were led down while thinking it was your own idea. What if the way you speak could rewire someone's mind? What if carefully chosen words, intonation, and timing could bypass logic and slip into the subconscious undetected? This is the power of Neuro-Linguistic Programming, or NLP. Developed in the 1970s, NLP was designed to model successful therapists, mapping how language patterns, sensory awareness, and behavioral cues could be used to influence thought and behavior. But in the wrong hands, it became more than a tool for healing. It became a weapon. NLP works by tapping into how people experience the world through visual, auditory, and kinesthetic channels. By identifying someone's dominant mode of processing, what they see, hear, or feel, you can tailor your words to match their internal landscape. A simple phrase becomes hypnotic. I see what you mean. That resonates with me. I hear where you're coming from. The more aligned the language, the deeper the connection, and once rapport is built, the door opens wider for suggestions, redirection, even control. One of NLP's most controversial techniques is anchoring, associating a specific stimulus, a gesture, a word, a touch, with a particular emotional state. Trigger the anchor later, and the emotion returns on cue. Marketers use it. Cult recruiters use it. Even pickup artists use it. Say the right words while someone is in an emotional peak, then use the same tone or movement later, and you've hooked their subconscious. NLP can even distort memory. Language patterns like embedded commands. You might begin to feel more open, or as you sit there, you may already be starting to trust me. Bypass resistance and implant suggestion. The victim feels like they've made a choice, when in truth, the choice was never theirs. So how do you protect yourself? Start by listening closely, not just to what's said, but how it's said. Does the language seem overly tailored? Are you being mirrored too perfectly? Do you feel unusually compliant, even when your gut says, wait? That's when you pause, regain conscious control, and break the transit, because the language can free, but it can also trap. And the most dangerous manipulations are the ones you never realize you agreed to. Not all manipulation is loud. Some of it whispers beneath awareness, too quick to catch, too subtle to challenge. This is the world of subliminal messaging. At its core, a subliminal message is a signal or a cue designed to bypass conscious detection yet still influence thought, mood, or behavior. It doesn't scream, it slides under the radar. And that's what makes it powerful. The most well-known form is visual. A single frame inserted into a film, lasting just 1/24th of a second. Too fast for the conscious mind to register, but enough for the subconscious to absorb. A soft drink flashed on screen during a movie. Popcorn, a brand, a word. Studies in the 1950s claimed sales spiked after subliminal ads were used in cinemas, though later debunked. The concept struck a nerve, and advertisers ran with it. But visual tricks aren't the only tools. Auditory subliminals work too. Words or affirmations layered beneath music, inaudible to the ear, but heard by the brain. They're used in self-help tapes, political ads, and sometimes even in warfare. Then there's symbolic subliminal messaging. Logos shaped like something else, colors chosen to evoke hunger, desire, trust. You don't notice the triangle in the FedEx logo, the phallic symbols in ancient art, or the predator's gaze in a cartoon. But your brain does. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Why does this matter? Because the subconscious mind is powerful. It influences over 90% of decisions, from what you buy to who you vote for to how you feel in a room without knowing why. And the scariest part, the most effective subliminal cues don't try to change your mind. They guide it, nudge it, until it feels like the decision was always yours. So how do you protect yourself? You train your perception. You slow down what's meant to be fast. You become aware of what was designed to stay hidden. Because the greatest danger of subliminal messaging isn't that it changes your mind. It's that you'll never notice it happened. You think you're making a free choice, but long before you decide, someone already nudged you. This is the priming effect, a psychological trick so subtle, most people don't even know it's happening. It works by planting a seed, an image, a word, an idea that quietly shapes your next move. The scariest part, it doesn't need to be obvious to work. In fact, the less you notice it, the more power it has. Priming has been used by advertisers, interrogators, political strategists, even magicians. It's the art of influence without force, manipulation without awareness. Here's how it works. Your brain is constantly making associations. See the word old, and you're more likely to walk slower afterward. Hear the word rude, and you might interrupt someone without meaning to. Your subconscious picks up cues and prepares your body and mind to act accordingly, all before you're even aware of it. In one experiment, participants were given a word puzzle filled with polite phrases. Later, when placed in a situation where they had to wait for someone to finish speaking, they waited patiently. Another group, primed with rude words, interrupted far more quickly. They all believed they were acting naturally. They weren't. Priming can shape your behavior, your opinions, even your beliefs. In marketing, you might be shown luxury imagery before entering a store, priming you to spend more. In politics, certain words are repeated to stir fear or patriotism. In interrogation, subtle environmental cues can make you more cooperative without a single threat. But it goes deeper. Facial expressions, tone of voice, background music. All of it can prime you. Even the temperature of a room can influence your perception of someone's personality. Warm coffee? They're friendly. Cold drink? Suddenly distant. The danger lies in how unaware we are. Priming bypasses logic. It shapes the lens you use to make decisions. And by the time you reach a conclusion, you're convinced it was your idea all along. So, how do you protect yourself? Start by slowing down. The faster your decisions, the more likely you're being primed. Second, question your impulse. Where did this reaction come from? Is it really yours? And finally, control your own environment. The images, words, and sounds you surround yourself with can prime you too, but in the direction you choose. Because in a world of invisible influences, awareness is your only defense. And once you see the setup, you can walk right past it. What if I told you there's a way to plant ideas in someone's mind without them ever realizing it? Not through shouting or threats, but through carefully chosen words. This is the power of suggestive language, a psychological trick that forms the basis of hypnosis, covert influence, and silent control. It doesn't need a swinging watch. It doesn't need a dark room, just words. Words delivered at the right time, with the right tone, to the right person. This trick works by bypassing logic and speaking directly to the subconscious. Instead of saying, "Do this," you say, "And some people find that they start feeling ready to change, almost without knowing what. You've made no amendment, but the suggestion is planted." Hypnotists use this constantly. They never say, "Sleep now," they say, "You might start to feel your eyelids getting heavy as your body relaxes, as your thoughts begin to drift." Suddenly the body responds, without a single conscious decision. And it's not just stage performers who use it. Politicians, advertisers, interrogators, and yes, manipulators in relationships all rely on the power of suggestion. You'll hear it in phrases like, "You're the kind of person who always wants to do the right thing. You already know what needs to happen. It's only natural you'd feel that way." These phrases don't ask, they assume. And when framed as truth, they slip past the mind's defense. Even questions can be used as the traps. Do you feel more relaxed now, or just starting to relax? Either way, you're relaxing. That's the illusion of choice. And it's everywhere. The real danger, suggestive language doesn't feel like control. It feels like your own thoughts. That's why it works. It guides your attention, frames your emotions, and plants ideas that grow roots deep inside your mind. And it's not just verbal, tone, rhythm, pauses. They all play a role. The slower the cadence, the more your conscious guard lowers. And when it drops, the message slips in unnoticed. So, how do you defend yourself? The first step is awareness. If someone's words feel too smooth, too persuasive, too good, step back. Ask yourself, are these thoughts mine, or were they placed there? Second, pay attention to patterns. If someone repeatedly phrases things in ways that assume agreement, that's not conversation. it's conditioning. And finally, strengthen your own inner voice. The more clearly you know your values and boundaries, the harder it is for someone else to speak for you. Because in a world where even your thoughts can be influenced by a whisper, the ability to think for yourself is the only true defense. They tell you the offer ends tonight, that the doors are closing, that there are only 3 spots left. Act now or lose your chance forever. This is the psychological trick known as creating a sense of urgency, a manipulation technique that uses time pressure to override logic, reflection, and free will. When urgency enters the picture, something primal kicks in. The brain doesn't think, it reacts. The possibility of missing out feels more dangerous than making the wrong choice. This is why limited time offers work so well. Why countdown timers on websites make people click faster. Why salespeople say, "There's someone else interested, but I can hold it for you if you decide now." It's not about truth, it's about pressure. Urgency bypasses the prefrontal cortex, the rational part of the brain, and activates the amygdala, the part responsible for fear and impulse. You're not being persuaded, you're being pushed, fast. And that's the trick. The manipulator doesn't need to convince you. They just need to make you feel like waiting is dangerous. In cults, this trick is spiritualized. You must act now, the world is ending. Salvation only comes to those who move immediately. In scams, it's dramatized. Your account has been compromised. Click this link or your funds will be frozen. In toxic relationships, it's emotionalized. If you don't prove your love right now, I'm leaving. Pressure, not persuasion. Urgency turns your future self into your enemy. It says, if you wait, you'll regret it. So act now, no time to think. But here's the truth. Almost nothing that truly matters requires an instant decision. Real love waits, truth endures. Opportunities that are real don't vanish in the blink of an eye. So how do you resist this trap? First, pause. Even if you're told there's no time, make time. If someone tries to make you decide on the spot, it's a red flag, not a deadline. Second, ask yourself, would I still want this if there were no pressure? Would I make the same choice tomorrow, in the cold light of day? And third, know your worth. Because the moment someone tries to make you feel like this is your last chance, is the moment you've already given them too much power. Urgency is a mirage. It looks real from a distance, but when you get closer, it fades. It starts with a small request, something harmless, something easy to agree to. Can I borrow 5 minutes of your time? Can you sign this petition? Can you help me just this once? You say yes, and that yes is the beginning. This is the foot in the door technique, a powerful psychological trick that opens the door to manipulation by starting small and escalating slowly, one favor at a time, one compromise at a time, until you're doing things you never thought you'd agree to. The trick works because the first yes rewrites how you see yourself. If you'll help someone once, your brain thinks, I must like them, or this must be important to me. That shift in identity, however slight, makes the next request harder to deny. It's the same strategy used in sales. Get someone to agree to a trial, then to a purchase, then to an upgrade. In cults, it's framed as service, a small act of obedience, then a bigger one, then full surrender. In relationships, it can look like compromise. At first, you give up a little time, then a little space, then your freedom. Each step feels like a continuation of the last. Each yes, justified by the one before it. But this technique isn't about consent. It's about momentum. The manipulator doesn't need to convince you of something extreme. They just need to get you to agree to something small, because once you've said yes, your mind wants to stay consistent. You don't want to seem unreliable or confront the discomfort of reversing course. So you keep going, keep agreeing, keep giving in, until the door isn't just open, you've stepped fully through it without even realizing. So how do you protect yourself? Start by recognizing the pattern. If someone keeps increasing their demands, ask, would I have agreed to this if they had asked for it up front? Second, reclaim your right to say no. A previous yes doesn't obligate you to agree again. You are allowed to change your mind. And finally, examine the intent. Are they building trust or leveraging it? Because the foot in the door technique isn't about gaining your trust. It's about using it. The most dangerous manipulation doesn't storm the gates. It knocks politely and waits for you to let it in. You're asked for something outrageous, too much, too big, too bold. You say no, of course. But then they ask for something smaller, something more reasonable by comparison. And suddenly, you say yes. This is the door in the face technique, a psychological manipulation that uses your own guilt and need for compromise against you. The first request is never meant to succeed. It's bait, a setup, a door slammed in your face, so the second one, the one they actually wanted, feels like relief. Salespeople use it all the time. They offer you the deluxe, the premium, the ultra package first. You decline, so they concede and offer you something cheaper. You feel like you've won, but they got exactly what they wanted. Parents do it, politicians do it, partners do it. Can you cancel your plans and spend the whole weekend with me? No? How about just dinner Friday night then? And now you're saying yes to something you might have declined if it had been the original request. Here's why it works. When someone makes a large request and then backs down, it feels like they've compromised. And psychologically, you feel obligated to meet them halfway. It's called the reciprocity norm. When someone gives, you feel the pressure to give back. But there was no compromise, only strategy. The second ask was the goal all along. The first one was a performance. This technique is subtle because it makes you feel like you're in control, that you negotiated, that you made the smart decision. But the truth is, you were led, step by step, through a door that looked like your own idea. So how do you defend yourself? First, slow down. Anytime someone quickly follows a rejected offer with a better one, pause. Ask yourself, would I have said yes if this was their first request? Second, notice your feelings. Are you saying yes out of relief, out of guilt, out of obligation? Then you're not choosing freely. You're being manipulated. And third, don't confuse pressure with persuasion. A good decision stands on its own. It doesn't need a rejection before it to make it palatable. The door in the face isn't meant to be opened. It's meant to distract you from the one behind it. It starts with an offer that feels too good to resist. A car at an incredible price. A dream opportunity with no catch. A partner who promises effort, love, and commitment. You say yes. And that yes is exactly what they were waiting for. Because once you commit, the offer changes. This is low balling, a psychological trick where someone gets your agreement first, then alters the deal when you're already invested. And disturbingly, it works more often than not. Car dealerships are notorious for it. You agree to a low price. The paperwork begins. Then suddenly a fee appears. A feature costs extra. The manager made a mistake, but by then, you've already imagined yourself driving the car. You've committed, not just externally, but internally. relationships use it too. In the beginning, they promise everything: emotional availability, honesty, respect. Then months later, they change. But because you're already in deep, you stay, telling yourself it's just a phase, or that things will go back to how they were. Why does lowballing work? Because commitment is sticky. Once you've agreed to something, your brain doesn't want to reverse that decision. It wants consistency. It wants to believe you made the right choice. So when the terms change, you justify it. You rationalize. You bend your standards to match the new reality. This is known as the commitment trap, where you feel like walking away means admitting you were wrong, and that discomfort often outweighs the cost of staying. But here's the danger. Lowballing isn't just about money. It's about boundaries, about manipulation that starts small and escalates until the cost is far greater than you ever agreed to. So, how do you protect yourself? Start by delaying commitment. The more time you give yourself before saying yes, the harder it becomes to trap you later. Second, ask, would I still agree to this if these were the original terms? If the answer is no, walk away, even if it's uncomfortable. And third, don't fear backing out. Your past yes doesn't owe anyone your future. The real trap of lowballing isn't the altered offer. It's the silence of someone who doesn't believe they're allowed to say no anymore. Everyone's talking about it. Everyone's buying it. Everyone's believing it. And so you think, maybe I should too. This is the Bandwagon Effect, a psychological shortcut that says, if a lot of people are doing something, it must be right. And on the surface, it doesn't feel manipulative. It feels like belonging. It feels like safety. But when used intentionally, it becomes a powerful tool for control and a subtle trap for the mind. Political movements use it. A small group begins chanting a message. Others join in. The more voices rise, the more the undecided feel pressure to align, not because they've thought deeply, but because they don't want to be left behind. Marketing campaigns thrive on it. Join millions of happy customers. Everyone is switching to this app. Don't miss out. They're not offering proof. They're offering momentum. And your brain, wired for social survival, wants to stay with the group. But here's the danger. The bandwagon doesn't check for truth. It doesn't reward independent thought. It rewards volume. And once you're on board, you stop questioning. You stop pausing. You assume the crowd must know something you don't. This is how misinformation spreads, how unethical trends go viral, how people support causes they never fully understood, just because everyone else seems to. Even in relationships, this bias creeps in. When all your friends support a partner, you overlook red flags. When society romanticizes a lifestyle, you chase it, even if it doesn't fulfill you. The bandwagon effect doesn't need force. It whispers, look around. You're the only one not clapping. Are you sure you're right? So how do you protect your mind? First, pause. Whenever something feels like an obvious yes, just because everyone is saying so, stop and ask why. Where's the data? What's the source? What's your actual opinion before the noise? Second, embrace the discomfort of standing alone. Sometimes the truth is not in the crowd. Sometimes it's in the quiet voice that hesitates while the others cheer. And finally, remember, just because something is popular doesn't mean it's right. And just because it's lonely to walk away doesn't mean it's wrong. Imagine you're told that a product is running out. Only 2 left in stock. Only 1 hour left to decide. Suddenly, you're no longer thinking rationally. You're rushing, panicking, scrambling to secure it before it's gone. This is the power of scarcity, a psychological manipulation that turns ordinary decisions into urgent emotional reactions. It works not by offering value, but by suggesting lack. The less there is, the more we want it. Why? Because the human brain is wired to avoid loss more than it seeks gain. Missing out feels worse than never having wanted it at all. Marketers know this. So do cult leaders. So do manipulators. The trick starts with artificial limits. Only 100 seats available. Offer expires at midnight. These statements aren't always true, but they don't need to be. They create a pressure cooker in the mind. Your logical brain shuts down. Your fear of missing out takes over. Even in relationships, this tactic is used. A manipulative partner threatens to walk away or acts distant to make themselves feel scarce. Their attention becomes a reward you have to chase, not something freely given. And the less you get, the more desperate you become to earn it. In workplaces, scarcity is tied to opportunity. You won't get this promotion again. This is your only shot. Suddenly, you're accepting unfair terms, all because you believe it's now or never. This is the illusion that scarcity creates, that time is vanishing, that value is slipping through your fingers, that you must act now or regret it forever. But here's the truth. Real value doesn't need pressure to be recognized. When someone uses urgency to make you decide, they're not empowering you, they're cornering you. So how do you protect yourself? First, pause. If something feels rushed, ask, why the hurry? Second, look for the pattern. Is urgency being used repeatedly to override your thinking? That's a red flag. And third, remember this. Anything worth having will still be worth having after you've had time to think. Scarcity is only powerful if you believe the lie that you don't have time. But once you reclaim your time, you reclaim your power. Your mind craves endings. It wants to know who was right, what happened next, and why things unfolded the way they did. Uncertainty makes us uncomfortable, so we fill in the gaps, even when we shouldn't. This is the need for closure, and it can be weaponized. When the mind is left in suspense, it becomes vulnerable. The story feels incomplete, the loop feels open, and whoever offers resolution suddenly holds all the power. This trick is used everywhere. In media, where headlines leave you hanging, you won't believe what happened next. In relationships, where manipulators pull away without explanation, and then return with just enough information to keep you chasing answers. The psychological tension created by an open loop drives people to make irrational decisions. It's the feeling of a text that goes unanswered, a conversation that never finished, a promise left hanging in the air. You obsess, you spiral, you need it to make sense. And the person who controls the ending controls you. Cult leaders do this by posing impossible spiritual riddles and offering the answer only through loyalty. Toxic partners start arguments but never resolve them, keeping you in emotional limbo. Even companies use it. You need to complete your profile. Just one more step to unlock this offer. The open loop isn't an accident. It's the trap. And here's the dark genius. Once you've accepted one answer, you become more willing to accept the next. The manipulator builds trust by closing small loops so they can exploit bigger ones later. So, how do you protect yourself? Step 1. Notice the discomfort. If you're obsessing over something unresolved, step back. Ask yourself, is this your desire for clarity or someone else's strategy? Step 2. Get comfortable with uncertainty. You don't need all the answers right now. Sometimes closure is a trick, a way to bait your brain into submission. And step 3. Don't chase the ending if the journey is toxic. Some questions don't deserve answers. Some people don't deserve your energy. Because closure isn't just about peace. It can be about control. The moment you stop needing every ending tied in a bow is the moment you become free. It doesn't start with a scream. It starts with a sigh, a subtle eye roll, a moment of silence that feels just a little colder than it should. No big confrontation, no obvious abuse, just tiny, carefully placed emotional cuts that over time bleed you dry. This is micro-manipulation, one of the most insidious psychological tactics. It hides in the mundane, in the overlooked, in the plausible deniability. A comment said as a joke, but it cuts deep. A compliment with a sting in the tail. A touch that lingers too long, or disappears exactly when you need it most. The manipulator's genius lies in subtlety. Each act is too small to call out, too insignificant to justify a reaction. So you stay silent. You rationalize. You wonder if you're imagining things. But it's not your imagination. It's a strategy. A partner who always brings up your past mistakes right before a big moment. A boss who praises you only when others are around. A friend who forgets your boundaries just often enough to make you feel disrespected, but never enough to justify confrontation. Each tiny act chips away at your reality. They don't break your spirit in one blow. They wear it down grain by grain until you're too tired to notice you've become someone else. The danger of micro-manipulation is that it trains you to doubt your own perception. You stop trusting your instincts. You start accepting the unacceptable because it doesn't seem that serious. And eventually, you become the one explaining their behavior to yourself. So, how do you escape? Step 1. Track the patterns. 1 incident is chance. 2 is a coincidence. 3 is a strategy. Step 2. Validate your feelings, even if no one else does. Just because the manipulation is small doesn't mean the impact is. And step 3. Speak the truth out loud, even if it's only to yourself at first. Because once you name the manipulation, you start taking your power back. Not all weapons are loud. Some are whispers, but they cut just as deep. You close your laptop, but your brain won't let go. You walk away from a conversation, but the words echo in your mind for hours. You try to sleep, but your thoughts keep circling back to the unfinished, the unresolved, the incomplete. This is the Zeigarnik Effect, a psychological phenomenon that reveals just how powerfully the unfinished can control us. Named after psychologist Bluma Zeigarnik, this effect was discovered when she noticed something strange in a cafe. Waiters remembered unpaid orders in perfect detail, but as soon as the bill was settled, they forgot them completely. Why? Because the brain clings to what's unresolved. Unfinished tasks create mental tension. Loose ends pull at your attention like static. The mind wants closure, and until it gets it, you are not free. This effect is often used in manipulation. A manipulator doesn't give you closure, they withhold it. They leave messages unanswered, arguments half resolved, promises half fulfilled. They plant emotional cliffhangers and walk away because they know you'll come back to finish the story, to find the resolution, to get the peace that only they can grant you. It happens in toxic relationships. They start a fight, storm out, and wait for you to chase them. It happens in cults and extremist groups. They offer a truth you're not ready for, but promise if you just stay, you'll finally understand. It happens in marketing, commercials, and on questions. Want to know the secret? You won't believe what happens next. It's not about content. It's about tension. The Zeigarnik Effect creates obsession, not by force, but by dangling the incomplete just out of reach. So, how do you protect yourself? First, recognize when someone is keeping you in a state of emotional suspense, when every interaction ends with more confusion than clarity. Second, create your own closure. You don't need someone else to finish the sentence. You don't need the apology that never comes. You don't need the final word. You can end the chapter yourself. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is, "This doesn't need to be resolved. It just needs to be over." What if the way someone looked at you could shape who you become? What if belief, just belief, could sculpt identity? This is the power of the Pygmalion Effect, a psychological force where expectations don't just predict behavior, they create it. The name comes from mythology. Pygmalion was a sculptor who carved a statue so beautiful he fell in love with it, and through his devotion, she came to life. In psychology, this effect reveals something terrifying. When people expect you to fail, you're more likely to falter. When they expect greatness, you rise to meet it, not because you want to, but because your mind unconsciously conforms to what others believe is true. And manipulators know this. They don't attack you with cruelty. They sculpt you with suggestion. You're the smart one. You're the problem child. You're the only one I can trust. You always mess things up. Over time, these statements don't feel like labels. They feel like facts. A teacher believes a student is brilliant, and the student performs better. A manager sees an employee as incompetent, and their confidence starts to crumble. A toxic partner tells you you're lucky they stayed, and you start to believe it. Expectation becomes identity. Belief becomes destiny. This is how control works, not with shackles, but with stories whispered again and again until they become your truth. And the worst part, it's often invisible. You won't even realize it's happening until you start living a life you never chose. So, how do you fight back? By questioning the voices that define you, by asking, "Do I believe this because it's true, or because someone expected it of me?" Break the script. Write a new role. Refuse to be someone else's sculpture. Because the most dangerous sculptor is not the one who carves you from stone, but the one who tells you you're already shaped and cannot change. Failure is supposed to be the end, a sign that you were wrong, that your effort wasn't enough. But for a manipulator, failure is something else entirely. A tool, a chance to reframe the narrative, a psychological trick that turns defeat into devotion. This is the power of reframing failure. When something goes wrong, the manipulator doesn't take responsibility. They shift the story, they twist the meaning, they make you believe that the failure wasn't their fault. It was yours. Or worse, it was part of a greater plan all along. Cult leaders do it constantly. Their predictions don't come true. They say the test was spiritual, a lesson in faith, a way to separate the devoted from the doubtful. Followers don't just forgive them, they cling tighter. Abusive partners do it too. They break your trust, then say it's because they were afraid of losing you. They hurt you, then claim it's proof of how deeply they care. They spin the pain into proof of love, and the victim, desperate for meaning, believes it. The key to this manipulation is control over the story. If someone controls how you interpret failure, they control how you feel about it and how you feel about them. This trick works because the human brain craves meaning. We don't just want to know that something went wrong. We want to know why. We want a reason, a narrative. And when that narrative comes from someone we trust, we rarely question it. That's why cults become stronger after failed prophecies. Why some followers grow more loyal after being betrayed. The pain is real, but the story around it has been altered. And here's where it gets even darker. If you suffer for something, you become more attached to it. This is known as effort justification. If you worked hard, endured pain, sacrificed your well-being, your mind will fight to believe it was all worth it. Otherwise, it would mean admitting you were fooled. So, when the manipulator reframes the failure, they don't just survive the mistake, they strengthen the bond. They make the victim feel grateful, loyal, devoted. So, how do you protect yourself? Pay attention to how people explain their failures. Do they take responsibility? Or do they spin a story that makes them the victim or the hero? Do they make you feel bad for doubting them? Do they convince you the pain was necessary? Because once failure becomes a tool, the person wielding it can make you believe anything, even that being broken is a form of progress. One good trait, that is all it takes. A charming smile, a confident voice, a polished appearance, and suddenly, everything else about the person seems better too. This is the halo effect, a psychological bias that distorts how we judge others. It's not based on logic. It's not about facts. It's about how one positive quality can color everything else we see. A charismatic leader speaks with confidence. People assume they're also intelligent, honest, and capable. A celebrity promotes a product. We believe it must be trustworthy. A teacher favors the well-dressed student. They're seen as more attentive, more polite, even if they're not. The halo effect hijacks our instincts. Instead of evaluating traits independently, our brains take a shortcut. We assume that if someone is good in one area, they're good in others. And that shortcut, it leaves us wide open to manipulation. Manipulators know this. They play into it. They dress the part. They speak with conviction. They make you laugh. And suddenly, you trust them. You forgive their mistakes. You overlook the red flags. Cult leaders are masters of the halo effect. They present as enlightened, kind, charismatic. So when they demand obedience, it doesn't feel dangerous. It feels justified. This bias shows up in relationships too. Someone who's attractive or successful might be seen as loyal, kind, or emotionally safe, even if they're not. Their charm creates a glow that blinds you to the truth. And here's the most dangerous part. The more invested you become, the harder it is to see clearly. Once the halo is in place, you reinterpret everything to fit it. Their cruelty becomes just passion. Their control becomes protection. Their lies become misunderstandings. So, how do you protect yourself? Slow down your judgments. Don't confuse charisma with character. Question your instincts. Ask yourself, would I trust this person if they weren't attractive? If they didn't speak so well? If someone else did the same thing? Would I excuse it? Because once the halo effect sets in, you're no longer seeing the person, you're seeing the illusion. And that illusion can be the perfect disguise for control, deceit, and manipulation. You walk into a store. A sign screams, "Only 3 left. Sale ends in 10 minutes." Your heart races. Your mind panics. You buy it, not because you need it, but because you are running out of time. This is the power of time constraints, a manipulation tactic that short-circuits logic and forces decisions under pressure. It's not about urgency. It's about control. Salespeople use it. Cult leaders use it. Toxic partners use it. Because when your time to decide is limited, so is your ability to think clearly. The trick works by creating artificial scarcity. You're told this is your only chance, that if you wait, the opportunity will vanish. And with the clock ticking, you don't evaluate the facts. You react to the fear of missing out. A manipulative partner says, If you don't commit to this now, we're done. A recruiter says, you have 1 hour to accept the job offer. A cult declares, your only chance to ascend is tonight. And people, otherwise rational, fold under the weight of urgency. Why does it work? Because fear hijacks the brain. It shuts down reason, replaces it with impulse. Under pressure, we stop weighing options. We look for the quickest escape from anxiety. And manipulators love that. They don't want you to reflect. They want you to panic. Because panic makes people compliant. It makes them obedient. It makes them say yes to things they would never agree to in the light of day. But here's the truth. Real opportunities don't require panic. Real love doesn't rush you. Real choices don't demand urgency. They allow for clarity. So how do you protect yourself? Recognize the tactic. If someone limits your time to think, ask why. Step back. Breathe. Give yourself permission to walk away, even if it means losing everything. Because if something can't survive your reflection, it was never meant to be part of your reality. Manipulators hate silence. They fear stillness. Because in that silence, you remember your power. Imagine walking into a store. You see a suit priced at $1,000. It's absurd. Then the salesperson shows you a sale rack. Another suit. Now just $400. Suddenly, it feels like a bargain. But nothing changed. Only your perception. This is the contrast principle in action. A psychological trick that makes something seem better or worse. Simply by comparing it to what came before. It's not about truth. It's about relativity. Manipulators use this constantly. They present an extreme first, something overwhelming, unreasonable, or deeply undesirable. Then they offer their real request, and compared to the first, it feels harmless, even generous. A cult leader demands total devotion. No questions, no boundaries. When you resist, they say, fine, you can just attend the meetings. And now, what once seemed invasive feels like a compromise. A toxic partner lashes out in rage, screaming, accusing, destroying things. The next day, they sulk in silence. No violence, just cold detachment. And suddenly, you're grateful, because at least they're not yelling. But nothing is healed. The abuse continues. Only now, you've been taught to lower your expectations. The contrast principle works because our minds don't evaluate things in isolation. We measure everything against what came before. Our perception of value, fairness, even love, is all shaped by the backdrop. This is why marketers show you the most expensive option first. Why manipulators exaggerate their stories. Why someone might introduce chaos just to make their control seem comforting by comparison. So, how do you defend yourself? Notice what's being paired. Are you being shown extremes just to make something else seem reasonable? Are you grateful for peace only because it followed abuse? Are you accepting conditions you'd never agree to on their own because the alternative seemed worse? Real love doesn't need contrast to look kind. Real truth doesn't require manipulation to sound fair. And real choices don't depend on illusions to seem right. Break the pattern. Stop comparing. Start seeing clearly. You spend hours assembling a crooked table. The instructions were confusing. You cursed. You sweat. You nearly gave up. But when it's done, you love it. Not because it's perfect, but because you built it. This is the Ikea effect. Our tendency to overvalue things we put effort into, even if the result is flawed. It's why people stay in toxic relationships, why they defend failed businesses, why cult members cling tighter after being forced to suffer. Because effort creates ownership, and ownership fuels attachment, even if what you're holding is hurting you. Psychologists discovered that people are more attached to furniture they assemble themselves than to better quality pieces made for them. It's not logic, it's labor. The same pattern shows up everywhere. A manipulative partner drags you through chaos, arguments, gaslighting, emotional mess. But then there's a brief calm, a moment of sweetness, and you think, this must be love. We worked so hard to get here. But what if the work was the trap? Manipulators know this. They make things harder so that when you finally get a reward, you value it more, you blame yourself less, and you walk away less. Cults and extremist groups use grueling initiation rituals, not to weed people out, but to pull them in. The harder you fight to stay, the more you feel it must be worth staying. But here's the truth. Suffering doesn't equal value. Just because something cost you everything doesn't mean it's worth anything. So how do you escape? Ask yourself, would I choose this again if I hadn't built it? If I hadn't invested time, money, or emotion, would I still want it? Detach your identity from what you've struggled to create, because real value isn't about effort, it's about truth. And sometimes the bravest thing is to walk away from what you once built and admit it was never meant to last. You're at the movies. The small popcorn is $4, the large is $7, but then there's a medium for $6.50. Suddenly, the large feels like a bargain, so you buy it, even if you didn't plan to, even if you didn't want that much. This is the Decoy Effect in action. It's a pricing trick that hijacks your perception of value by introducing a third, strategically placed option, one that's not meant to be chosen. Marketers guide your decision without you realizing it. The medium, in this case, is the decoy. It's priced just close enough to the large to make the large seem like the better deal, even though just moments ago, $7 felt excessive. This manipulation isn't limited to snacks. Tech companies do it constantly. A basic phone, a pro model, and one awkwardly priced in between. Most people end up buying the most expensive version, not because they need it, but because the decoy made it feel like smart value. Restaurants do it with wine lists. Subscription services do it with their premium plus ultra plans. It's everywhere. And the scary part is, it works even when you know about it. Your brain loves shortcuts, and the decoy effect offers one. A mental illusion of value based not on what something is truly worth, but on what it's sitting next to. So how do you break free? Slow down. Ask yourself, would I still choose this if the decoy didn't exist? Am I choosing this because it's best for me, or because it just feels better than the worst option? The decoy effect doesn't pressure you directly. It doesn't even lie. It just changes the frame. And sometimes that's all it takes to make you spend more, settle for less, and believe you made the smartest choice in the room. A man swallows a sugar pill, believing it's a powerful drug, and his pain vanishes. His blood pressure improves. His symptoms fade. But the pill, it contains nothing, no medicine, no active ingredient, just belief. This is the placebo effect, one of the strangest and most powerful forces in psychology. The body heals not because of chemistry, but because the mind thinks it should. Doctors have watched tumors shrink, insomnia disappear, even depression lift, all from fake treatments. And it's not imaginary. Scans show real brain changes, real shifts in hormone levels, real improvement. The trick? Expectation. If the brain expects relief, it starts producing chemicals to match. Endorphins, dopamine. Even immune responses activate as if the body is preparing for real medicine. But here's where it gets dark. Manipulators know this, and they exploit it. They sell fake cures, miracle supplements, magnetic bracelets, detox teas, promising transformation while delivering nothing. And because belief is so powerful, people often do feel better for a while, until it wears off, until they chase the next fix. Even in relationships, the placebo effect shows up, telling someone, "This will make you feel safe," or "I know exactly how to help you," can have a calming effect, even if no action follows. It's emotional placebo, comfort by suggestion. But belief is a double-edged sword, because there's also the nocebo effect, when negative expectations make people sicker. Tell someone a harmless pill causes nausea and they might start vomiting. That's how strong the mind-body link is. So, what's the lesson? Your mind is a pharmacy. Belief alone can heal or harm, but beware of those who sell you illusions, who rely on faith to mask their lack of substance. They don't need real solutions, just your trust, and once they have it, you'll do the rest. Loss hurts more than gain excites. In fact, psychological studies show that losing something has nearly twice the emotional impact as gaining something of equal value. This is the dark gravity of loss aversion, a cognitive bias so strong it can shape choices, anchor emotions, and be ruthlessly exploited to manipulate you. Imagine this. You're offered $100. Then you're told you might lose it unless you act fast, upgrade, buy more, agree now. That panic, that tightening in your chest. That's not logic. That's loss aversion. And it's one of the most powerful psychological levers in existence. Marketers know it. Politicians know it. Manipulators? They build entire strategies around it. Why? Because fear of loss bypasses reasoning. It hijacks survival instinct. When faced with the possibility of losing, you stop calculating and start clinging. In toxic relationships, this looks like, "You'll never find someone who loves you like I do." In sales, "Last chance, this offer expires in 3 hours." In cults, "Leave, and you lose your family, your salvation, your identity." It's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's subtle. A boss hints you might not be needed. A friend threatens distance if you don't comply. Your brain perceives loss, and suddenly, you're no longer choosing. You're reacting. Loss aversion is so hardwired that we'll often accept worse outcomes just to avoid feeling like we lost. Even if staying hurts more, we stay. In jobs, in belief systems, in toxic patterns, because leaving feels like loss. And that's the danger. When fear of letting go becomes stronger than desire to move forward, you become manipulable. So how do you break the spell? First, name it. If someone makes you feel rushed, afraid, or trapped, ask, "What am I afraid of losing?" Then ask, "Is the loss even real? Or is it being used to control me?" Second, flip the script. Instead of fearing what you'll lose, consider what you'll gain by letting go. Peace, freedom, self-respect. Because what you cling to out of fear often isn't worth having. And when you reclaim your choices from fear, you take your power back. A hand on your shoulder, a reassuring pat on the back, a lingering handshake. These gestures may seem small, but the human touch is one of the most powerful forms of silent influence, and manipulators know exactly how to use it. Touch speaks before words. It bypasses logic, tapping into our deepest wiring: safety, trust, connection. From the moment we're born, we're conditioned to associate touch with care, and that conditioning never leaves us. Studies have shown that a brief touch from a server can increase tips. A light touch on the arm can make someone more likely to agree, and physical proximity from someone in authority can suppress resistance altogether. Touch communicates dominance, warmth, familiarity. It can disarm, soothe, control. That's why cult leaders embrace followers. Why politicians shake hands relentlessly. Why abusers often alternate affection with harm. Because the same hand that soothes can confuse. And when the mind is confused, it becomes vulnerable. In toxic dynamics, the touch may come after cruelty, a hug after yelling, a gentle stroke after betrayal. It sends a mixed signal. The body calms, even as the mind screams. The contradiction is deliberate. It creates dependence. And it's not just about the touch you receive. It's about the touch you don't. Withdrawal of touch can feel like abandonment. It creates longing. It makes victims chase closeness again, even if it means tolerating abuse just to feel affection. Touch is primal, subconscious. It communicates what words can't. That's why it's so dangerous in the wrong hands. So, how do you protect yourself? Be aware of how touch affects your decisions. Ask, do I trust this person? Or do I just feel bonded because they're physically close? Is this connection real or manufactured through warmth and contact? And most of all, remember that real trust is built through consistency, not chemistry. Touch can be healing, but it can also be used as a leash. Only when you recognize the difference can you choose when to reach out and when to pull away. It starts with something small. A waiter mentions how tired he is before taking your order. A stranger at a fundraiser casually shares how nervous they feel about asking for money. Before you realize it, you're leaning in, opening up, saying yes. This is the foot-in-the-mouth effect, a psychological tactic that turns vulnerability into persuasion. Unlike its cousin, the foot-in-the-door technique, which starts with a small request, the foot-in-the-mouth begins with a statement, a simple self-disclosure, something that lowers defenses, makes the speaker seem human, relatable, honest. And that's exactly what makes it so effective. The moment someone shares something personal, your brain instinctively softens. We're wired to respond with empathy, to connect, to trust. And in that moment of connection, you're far more likely to comply with what comes next. Whether it's a favor, a donation, or a concession in an argument, salespeople use it. Manipulators use it. Even cult recruiters use it. They open with their own struggles, their hardships, their doubts. Not because they want to connect, but because they know you'll let your guard down. And once your defenses are lowered, you're far more susceptible to suggestion. Here's the twist. Not all self-disclosures are sincere. Some are crafted, timed, performed. A rehearsed anecdote, a planted detail, just enough to seem real and unlock your willingness to give. The danger lies in this. You don't feel manipulated. You feel trusted, and in turn, you trust back. So, how do you protect yourself? Ask, why are they telling me this? Is this connection mutual or one-sided? Are they sharing to relate or to extract? Not all vulnerability is a trap, but when someone's honesty always leads to your compliance, it's not vulnerability, it's a strategy. Real connection is mutual, built on truth, not performance. The foot in the mouth might seem like a harmless phrase, but when used strategically, it opens the door to influence you never saw coming. You're cleaning out your closet. You find an old sweater you haven't worn in years. It's out of style, a little faded. You'd never buy it today. And yet, you hesitate. You think, maybe I'll wear it again someday. This hesitation, that's the endowment effect, the powerful psychological bias that makes us overvalue what we already own. Here's how it works. The moment something becomes yours, your brain assigns it more value, not because of what it's worth, but because of who it belongs to. It doesn't matter if it's a mug, a house, a relationship, or an idea you've clung to for years. Ownership changes perception. It creates attachment, and that attachment becomes sticky. In experiments, people are given random items, a pen, a mug, a snack, and they asked how much they'd sell it for. Even when they've had the item for less than a minute, they consistently demand more to give it up than others are willing to pay. They didn't buy it. They didn't need it. But once they owned it, it became valuable. This trick isn't just used in sales, it's used in manipulation. Abusive relationships. You stay because you've invested so much already. The time, the memories, they make it harder to leave. You've endowed it with meaning, even if it's causing harm. In politics, people cling to bad leaders, not because they trust them, but because they've chosen them. And rejecting them means admitting they were wrong. Marketers know this. That's why stores offer free trials, test drives, money-back guarantees. They're not hoping you'll test the product. They're hoping you'll start feeling like you already own it. Because once you do, giving it up will feel like losing a piece of yourself. But here's the truth. Value isn't always real. Sometimes it's emotional. Sometimes it's manipulated. Sometimes it's a trap. So next time you're holding on to something, a belief, a possession, a person, ask yourself, do I truly want this? Or have I just had it for so long? I forgot how to let it go. The endowment effect doesn't just influence what you keep, it shapes who you become. Most people think mind control looks like hypnosis or flashing lights, but the truth is far more subtle and far more dangerous. Because real mind control doesn't take away your choices. It makes you believe you chose the very thing that was planted in your mind. This is the illusion of free will. Advertisers do it every day. They shape your desires by repeating the same messages over and over, until they feel like your own thoughts. You deserve this. Everyone else has it. This will make you happy. Soon, you're not asking if you want something. You're asking when you'll get it. Cults take it further. They don't force beliefs. They guide you to them. Through carefully controlled environments, repetition, isolation, and peer pressure. And eventually, you start parroting the beliefs back. Not because you were forced, but because you now feel them to be true. This is the real trick of mind control. It doesn't break you. It rebuilds you. Every manipulative system, from totalitarian regimes to abusive relationships, follows the same formula: limit what you're exposed to. Repeat the message constantly. Isolate dissenting voices. Reward compliance. Frame obedience as virtue. Until one day, you defend the very thing that's controlling you. And the scariest part, you think you're making your own decisions. Free will becomes a theater. The set was built by someone else. The lines were fed to you. But because you got to choose the costume, you feel like the star. But awareness breaks the spell. Question your preferences. Why do you believe what you believe? Who benefits from your choices? Did you choose them? Or were they chosen for you? Mind control isn't about puppets on strings. It's about rewriting identity so the puppet ties its own knots and calls them freedom. It looks harmless, passive, even foolish. But playing dumb is one of the most effective forms of control ever used in human interaction. Because when someone pretends not to understand, not to notice, not to be capable, it disarms you. You lower your guard. You do more of the work. You explain. You justify. You carry the emotional load. And all the while, they maintain control, without ever seeming like the one in charge. Children do this instinctively. A kid who doesn't want to clean their room might suddenly forget how. The adult gets frustrated, gives in, and does it for them. But adults use this same tactic too, especially manipulators. A toxic boss claims they didn't know a project was falling apart, even though you emailed them twice. Now you're fixing it, and they avoid the blame. An emotionally unavailable partner pretends they don't get why you're upset, so you end up comforting them while your own needs go unmet. This isn't ignorance, it's strategy. By acting incapable or unaware, a manipulator avoids responsibility while silently shifting the burden to you. And it works because we're wired to fill in gaps. When someone acts confused, our instinct is to help, to explain, to overfunction. That instinct becomes the trap. And over time, you're not just doing your job, you're doing theirs. You're not just solving your problems, you're solving theirs too. So, how do you recognize this trick? Watch for patterns. If someone always needs help, never takes accountability, or conveniently forgets at just the right time, it may not be incompetence. It may be control. And the antidote? Stop compensating. Let the silence sit. Let the confusion be theirs to solve. Because the power of playing dumb only works if someone else keeps picking up the pieces.